My grandfather was born in 1912 and passed back in 2011. We weren't especially close, but I had been there to help clean out his estate. I got a whole bunch of stuff, old furniture and family photos mostly, but I also ended up with a couple of miscellaneous boxes of memories. Admittedly, I wasn't interested in looking through them. I put them in the attic and forgot about them until last week, when my daughter was asking about him. We opened the boxes together and an old copper dropped from one of the boxes and rolled across the floor. It was a strange coin with a crisscross symbol on both sides. My daughter was fascinated, but as I looked in the box, I found a stack of papers. It was a memoir written in my grandfather's handwriting and detailed a recount of some of his early days working on a whaling vessel. I didn't even know that he worked on a ship ever, considering how the man refused to go anywhere near the ocean. He wouldn't even come to the beach with us, stating instead that the gods of old ruled the sea, and that we should not go near it. He even had a little shrine, which I dutifully threw out, dedicated to a god I wasn't familiar with. Because of this, I decided it was better that I read through it all first before letting my daughter read the letters. This is what they said. It wasn't all in English, but I've translated what I could. The day begins before the sun has risen down at the docks. It's bitterly cold. Ice coats the frozen wood and the damp smell of sea salt rolls off the early morning mist. Men move sluggishly to beat the ice off of riggings and prepare to set sail. It was my first day. I was a green hand, a mess boy, hired by Captain Johann Eid from a newspaper advertisement. I was only 17 at the time, but I lied and said that I was 20. My teeth chattered and my breath steamed in the air as I waited. "You, Timothy Horn." A tall, gruff-looking man approached me. His hair was light brown and his beard was full orange. "Yes, sir, I'm waiting for Captain Eid." "While you're looking at him, didn't expect you to be quite so skinny, boy." I laughed nervously. That's what everybody tells me. He glared down at me for a long moment, folding his arms before asking, "You ain't never been on a ship either, have you?" My dad took me fishing once or twice." Good enough. Follow me." He turned, expecting me to follow, and I hurried after him. The sun was beginning to rise by now and the oil lamps were burning low. The ship was a decent size and well maintained with a metal hull and wooden deck. A harpoon gun was mounted on the front and the thick sail ropes looked pristine. We were a whaling vessel, one of the last ones at the time in the north. Most other whalers had went south toward the Antarctic, but Captain Eid insisted on remaining north, which was quite fortunate for me, or I wouldn't have gotten the job and I needed it. My father had passed away the year before and we were struggling with my 5 siblings. I was the oldest, so it made sense that I would be the one to work, and whaling was a respected job back then. Of course, my mother wasn't happy with it after hearing old wives' tales of husbands being lost at sea. She was worried she would lose me as well, and I can't say that I wasn't nervous. I had heard stories myself of whales capsizing small boats, and I was glad to see the ship that I was going to be on was bigger than I thought. Captain Eid toured me around. "The below area is where we sleep and eat. If a big wave hits you, hold on to something tight, and if you're gonna be sick, do it over the side." "Yes, sir." "This is first and second mate, David and Roger Finn. If you have any hassles, you talk to them." He introduced me to 2 light-haired men who were obviously brothers. "Good to meet you." David shook my hand. "Try not to fall overboard, eh?" Roger laughed, ruffling my hair. "Yeah, I'll try." I agreed awkwardly. They were friendly enough, I guessed. "Simon over here is our gunner, and Halvard is our meat cutter," Eid explained. gesturing to two other men who waved back as they worked on the riggings. "You'll be responsible for spotting whales, keeping everything clean and helping out around, all right?" "Yes, sir," I agreed without hesitation. "Good. We set sail in 1 hour, so if there's anything else you need, I suggest you arrange it before then." Captain E had me accompany David to get rations for the ship, and it was as I was paying for 3 sacks of potatoes that I fumbled with the coins. My fingers were numb from the cold air and several coins spilled in all directions. One in particular landed with a clatter on the frozen boards and rolled quite some distance, coming to an abrupt stop under the boot of a man that I didn't know. He was the younger of 2 tall men, both with dark hair and striking blue eyes. He couldn't have been more than early 20s in age, while his companion could have been mid-30s with a few graying strands in his hair. They looked too alike to not be related, and as the younger one knelt to pick up the coin, he spoke. "Does it change your mind?" "Why should it?" The 2 men spoke in a language that I didn't know with an accent that I couldn't place, and I realized with dread which coin had rolled to them. It was an old Norse coin my mother had given me. She said it was supposed to guide Viking sailors and that I should keep it with me as a prayer to Nord, the god of safe seafaring and fishing. I didn't believe in anything like that, but I kept it with me to humor her. "Sorry about that, cold fingers." I spoke up, hoping that would be enough to prompt them to hand it back to me. For a moment they were startled, as if they didn't expect to see me there or hadn't expected me to speak to them. However, as they recovered, the elder one smiled broadly, slamming a big hand on his companion's shoulder, earning him a rueful, sideways glare. "Oh, it's all right, my son here is just as lazy. I mean clumsy, he drops many things." He addressed me in a heavily accented English, before speaking to his son. "Hand the coin back." In response, the younger man allowed the coin to drop from his fingers. By misfortune, it happened to land between a crack in the boards and dropped into the water below with a soft splash. "My mistake, I dropped many things," Mercury responded casually. His English was accented, but unmistakably American, and it seemed to me like he was mocking his father's accent in his choice of words. Both I and the older man stared after the coin for a long moment in disbelief, before I found my voice again. "That's bad luck, ain't it?" I laughed to break the tension. It in no way felt like a mistake, and my mother wouldn't like to know that it was lost forever. Neither spoke, and an uncomfortable silence passed before the older one pulled a silver coin from his pocket. "As I said, my son is clumsy. Take this for your troubles," he offered, but I waved my hand dismissively. "No, it's all right. It was just an old copper coin. Can't even spend it here," I assured. He looked at me with sympathy, but it was as he was about to insist that David recalled my attention. "Boy, did you get them spuds?" "Yeah, coming," I shouted over my shoulder. I had only turned away for a moment, but when I looked back, both of the blue-eyed men were gone. The air seemed colder where they had been, and I shivered involuntarily. I hadn't heard them step away, and I couldn't see them anywhere nearby. It was as if they had simply vanished in the mist. By the time David and I returned to the ship, the captain was arguing with the harbor master. "I told you can't set sail with a crew of only 5 men. What do you want? I hired another man. Look, there he is right now. Timothy." The man turned to look me up and down. "That's hardly a man," he exclaimed, and the captain threw his arms up. "He is too." "Well, it don't matter, does it? You need at least 8 men to man a ship this size." "Oh, I've done it before." "So you're admitting to other violations now." The captain paused. "No," he answered carefully. "Right then, when you have the appropriate number of crew members." If you're in need of more crew members, my son and I are looking for work." It was one of the men that I had met earlier that spoke up, and Captain Eid jumped at the opportunity. He looked them over once before agreeing readily. "You're hired, and I take it that means you got no more problems here." He addressed the harbor master, who looked suitably irritated. "I guess not." "A good day to you then." "Yeah, alright, but don't you be sending me out any distress signals later. I won't answer 'em," he warned. "Limey old bugger," Captain Eid muttered. I must have looked more shocked than I thought because David leaned over to inform me. "They're brothers, you don't need to worry about it," he assured. "Right." Personally, I couldn't see the resemblance. As the harbor master left Eid, he approached his new crew members. "Captain Eid, glad to have you with us." He offered out his hand. "Even, dear, even for short, and this is my son, Mercury." The older of the two introduced them, shaking the captain's hand firmly in doing so. I would have guessed they were brothers, but father and son. The man didn't look old enough for his son to be that grown. "Is that mercury like the metal or the poison?" Even laughed. "Some days it's hard to say." "You got any experience on ships?" "Certainly do. My son and I have sailed every coast." "Splendid. Welcome aboard." We set sail not long after that. The open ocean was vast. Bright sunlight glinted off the deep blue surface, and seabirds floated lazily on the breeze above. It was shaping up to be a fair day with calm seas and no clouds in sight. The rest of the crew chatted idly among themselves. Evan's distinct accent was notable as he spoke joyfully. However, I stayed back a bit. They were all smoking cigars, but my mother had taught me not to. She said it was a disgusting habit, and if I'm honest, I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. They were all friendly enough, but I had nothing to share. I wasn't old enough for a wife or kids, and I didn't want them to figure that much out. Instead, I stood toward the stern of the boat, watching the bow slice through the waves. Eventually, it was Mercury who came to stand beside me. His eyes were remarkably blue, almost a match to the ocean, and his lashes were long enough that they cast a shadow across his cheeks. He didn't say anything, and I wilted in the awkward silence. "So is Evan really your dad?" I asked awkwardly. "Unfortunately. He hardly looks older than you." "Oh, he's older than he looks. I'm the youngest of his children." "He must have started young," I laughed, trying to muster the bravo of the 20-year-old that I was supposed to be. "I suppose you could say that," he agreed. "Have you got any kids?" "I have a son." "Where is he?" Mercury smiled slightly. "Home." "Why didn't you bring him with you?" The boy is crippled. It's a weakness that makes travel difficult." "Oh," I felt bad for asking. The conversation died shortly thereafter, so I was grateful when the captain sent me up to the barrel to watch for whales. I had never been a particular fan of heights, and I clung to each rung desperately on the way up. Each time the ship rolled to the side, I held on for dear life, and when it eventually lulled back to the other side, I climbed as quickly as I could. It was a relief to reach the barrel, and I scrambled into it gratefully. Getting back down was going to be much worse. Hours passed before I spotted the first whale. I shouted back down and pointed excitedly. I had no idea if they could hear me. However, as our trajectory changed and steam billowed out from the engine room the chase was on, a buzz filled the air as we closed the distance between us and the mammal. When we were near enough to see it from the deck, I climbed down to join the rest of the crew, and I was there when the gunner, Simon, released the explosive-tipped harpoon. It hit with a wet crack, and to my surprise, the animal let out a soft sound of pain. It was a cry really, and I winced. I wasn't prepared for that. The rope pulled taut as the whale tried to escape, and Captain Ead gave the orders for Mercury and I to reel it in. We took a hold of the rope and heaved, or rather he did. I'm not sure that it did anything as Mercury dragged the wounded creature back to the ship, nearly single-handedly. It writhed in the water beside the boat. Red stained the ocean, and when it exhaled, it expelled a sad spray of foaming blood into the water. I hadn't really seen anything die before, and I couldn't help but feel sick. I don't know how Mercury could stand it. He didn't seem to care at all. "Pump it with air, boy," Captain Ead ordered, and I looked up at him with wide eyes as he handed me what was essentially a giant hypodermic needle. "What? It's still alive?" I murmured. I could feel myself trembling. "It'll die soon enough. Best not to waste time." I heard what he was saying, but as I glanced back over the edge of the railing, the whale and I made eye contact. It looked helpless, desperate, like it didn't understand what was happening and I couldn't do it. Moreover, I didn't understand how anybody else could. "Here, let me." It was Even who solemnly took the air pump for me, and I allowed it without protest. He was perhaps the only person who looked uncomfortable. Without a word, he leaned over the side dangerously and placed a hand on the whale. "It's all right. Rest now." He spoke softly to the animal and it gradually became still. And then he plunged the air pump into it with force, and I became closely acquainted with the deck. When I came back to, we were ashore, stopped at the whaling station, and I was laying on a plain flat bed in the below quarters. My mouth was dry and my head hurt as I sat up. "Aye, London Bridge is up." It was David who grinned back at me as I reoriented myself. "What?" "Oh, you earned yourself the nickname London Bridge since you fell down." There's a popular nursery rhyme about the London Bridge falling down, and I understood that was going to be my new title, probably forever. "Right, what happened again?" "You fainted and hit your head on the banister on your way down. Knocked yourself right out." "Where is everybody else?" "At the whaling station. They left me behind to look after you." He stood to go and I reluctantly followed him out. The station was a chain of several stone buildings with metal roofing. The ground was frozen and patches of snow sat melting slowly over bright green grasses. There were other boats docked in the harbor, but as far as I could see, no other people were around. Our boat was docked beside a long blood-soaked ramp, and I made the mistake of looking over to see Even, Mercury, and Halvard stripping slices of blubber from the whale. They were using long sticks with blades on the end to cut into the thing before sending the cuts down a small chute off to the side, and I was sick on the spot. To avoid being anywhere near the whale, I drifted away to look around the rest of the station. It was quiet and cold and surprisingly empty, I thought. I had expected that maybe the other crews were inside or all gathered somewhere, but the area was as good as a ghost town. It was odd only because it looked like there had been people around recently. Drinks had been left out to freeze in the weather, and used tools sat out on benches as if placed down for only a moment. Open doors swayed gently, and the whole station groaned in the breeze. The commotion of seabirds squabbling further ahead drew my attention, and as I entered a new area, the smell of rotting whale permeated the air. I gagged involuntarily as I rounded the corner. Some other crew had left an entire whale carcass on the docking ramp, and it was semi-frozen, bloated, and festering. As I watched, the seabirds suddenly fell silent, and all at once took off into the air in a rush of feathers. They abandoned their feast without a moment's hesitation, and my blood turned to ice as I realized the carcass was moving. The blubber wobbled as the entire whale jolted as if being tugged. My heart beat hard and my skin prickled. For a moment I thought that I was delusional. The animal was massive. Nothing could move it like that. But then it happened again. The whale shuddered and then began to slide back down the ramp toward the water. Flesh that had frozen to the dock tore away, and in moments the entire thing had slipped back into the ocean, leaving only a trail of visceral remains in its wake. I didn't waste a single moment. I ran back to my crew as if my feet had wings all on their own. Something just pulled a whale back into the water. I shouted breathlessly as I reached the captain. "What are you talking about, boy? The whale is right here," he responded, appropriately confused. "Not this one, the other one." I pointed vaguely in the direction that I had come, and the others moved skeptically to investigate. When we reached the area, it was just as I had left it. Only the birds had returned to pick at the stuck flesh that remained. It looked remarkably normal, and there wasn't any other trace left as evidence. I swear I ain't lying. "It is a bit odd that no one else is here," David agreed, as the captain stared long and hard out across the ocean. "Well, there's nothing here now." Captain Iad spoke at last, "so let's not get ourselves all worked up." As we spoke, it was Mercury who moved past us to stand at the edge of the ramp. "Mercury, be careful," Evan warned him. "Oh, your concern is touching," he responded dryly, reaching down to pick something from the edge of the dock. From a distance, it looked like he had picked up a giant abalone shell. It was bigger than his hand, and I expected that he might bring the unusual find over. However, after a tense moment, he instead tossed it into the water before returning to us. "What did you find?" Evan asked curiously. He spoke in a different language as he responded calmly with a smile. That was the first time that I had seen him smile, and it was unsettling. His teeth were unnaturally perfect and the canines were pointed. Only rich people had teeth like that. "What did he say?" I asked, hesitant. "Just a chunk of ice," Mercury answered casually. That was a relief. We spent the night at the station. The wind howling against the tin roofing and the bitter cold kept me awake for the better part of the night. As I drifted between the edge of sleep and wakefulness, I thought that I heard voices carrying on that breeze. Not that I could make out what they were saying. When morning came, it wasn't a minute too soon, and I was one of the first ones up. Right away, I began preparing to set sail, shoveling the snowfall from the night off the deck and beating ice off the riggings. It wasn't long before Mercury joined me. He was strong and worked at least twice as fast as I did while hardly breaking a sweat. He was eager to leave as well, I thought. Snow settled in his hair, and the silver ring on his thumb caught my attention because I thought it was a bad choice to wear one. Most of the other men stowed even their wedding bands for fear of losing them or having the skin ripped from their fingers if they got it caught on anything. However, I chose not to ask about it. Instead, I tried to make small talk. "How'd you sleep last night?" "I didn't," he answered without looking over. "Did the wind keep you up all night?" "Yeah, me too." "How old did you say you were again?" he asked abruptly. 20, I lied quickly. "You talk too much for a 20-year-old. He could have just said that he didn't want to talk, and that would have been fine. Fortunately, I wasn't allowed the chance to respond before the rest of our crew had arrived. "Hey, looks like the mess boys have got us all ready to go." Simon laughed as he stepped onto the newly shoveled deck. "That Mercury did most of it," I admitted reluctantly as he patted me on the back. "You were here before me," Mercury stated calmly as everyone boarded. We had gotten everything ready, and all that was left to do was to have breakfast and set off, which I was only too eager to do. So when I overheard Evan speaking with the captain, I wasn't exactly pleased. "I think we should stay at the station for today. Looks like bad weather on the horizon." "Nonsense, there's not a cloud in sight," Captain Iad countered. Regardless, the sea is upset, even tried. I see misfortune for us if we sail today. He had paused for a moment as if considering when Mercury spoke up. Don't let my father's superstitions get to you. Not a lot of money left in Wales these days. Have to catch a few to make it worthwhile. And I saw whale spouts earlier this morning. There's plenty out there. Well, can't miss an opportunity like that, can I? Captain Ead amused. If it looks like bad weather, we'll turn back, trust me. I've been on the seas longer than anyone. He even looked distinctly displeased as he glared over to his son. Why do you insist on doing this? The same reason I do anything, because it's going to be fun. Mercury answered in English, and I couldn't help but wonder what his father had said. When we set sail, the weather seemed as fair as it was yesterday, and true to what Mercury said, there were a great number of whales about. We must have killed 8 or so before midday, leaving a trail of floating carcasses stuck with flags in our wake. By the time that we saw the first cloud in the sky, we had made a good haul, although it was Even that seemed increasingly nervous as the day drew on. We should turn back now, he reiterated. Nonsense, the day is still young, Captain Ead assured him, but the man took hold of his arm. I said we should turn back now, he repeated firmly. It was no longer a request. It was an order, and the authority was astonishing. It was only Mercury who didn't seem surprised, and Ead faltered. I'm the captain of this ship. You won't be if you don't turn back. Are you threatening me? Ead accused with narrowed eyes. No, the answer came reluctantly. Then unhand me. Even slowly released his grip on the captain. This is a bad idea. You don't know what's in these waters. Nonsense, I've sailed longer than you have. Doubtful, he murmured to himself as Ead moved away. Hours passed from then and we spotted no more whales. Simon relieved me from the barrel and I returned to the deck to play cards with Ead, David, Roger, and Mercury. Halvard left the group to check the engine, and Even simply refused to participate. As we each stared at our cards in silence, it was only the gentle slosh of waves against the hull that disturbed the quiet. The temperature dropped as the sun fell toward the horizon, and a heavy mist rolled in across the ocean. Even offered to take the helm, claiming that he was good at navigating through misty conditions. He steered us away from near invisible chunks of floating ice. How he could even see them was beyond me, but I suspect he took the liberty to turn the ship around in doing so. Eventually, we passed by the whales that we had flagged earlier, and it was around that time that the engine cut out. Momentum stopped at once and the boat drifted with the waves dead in the water. Halvard, what's going on? Ead called to us as he got up to investigate. However, Even and his son shared a brief glance before Mercury smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was bemused, and he got up to look over the edge of the railing. Don't do anything hasty, his father warned. Do you remember how difficult it is to swim ashore in frigid waters, father? Mercurius. Just a question. His eyes were unmistakably following movement in the water, and I reluctantly came to stand beside him to see what it was. Below, the ocean was dark and calm. Small waves were crested with white sea foam, and the visibility was not more than a few meters out with the heavy fog. In the near distance, a wave broke with an unusual slosh, and the mist swirled unnaturally around movement at the surface. Something's out there, I murmured, mostly to myself. If you believe in the gods of old, you'd better get on your hands and knees and pray. Maybe I'll choose to save you. I hesitated. Was he making a joke? I wasn't allowed the chance to answer before something nudged the boat, causing it to rock forward violently, and both Mercury and I very nearly fell overboard. What the heck was that? David demanded, and he scrambled back to his feet. A whale? Roger suggested anxiously. Ain't no whale big enough to do that. Simon shouted down at us from the barrel while pointing to the port side. What was that? David called back, only to receive a secondary inaudible answer. What? He shouted louder, frustrated. He's saying that there's something below us, Mercury commented sedately. As he spoke, I was watching the water. A coil of massive dark scales broke the surface beside the hull, and my legs turned to jello. I stumbled, falling back as I tried to process what I had seen. Whatever it was no whale. The ocean churned as the coils of its body writhed beneath the surface before it gradually rose up to tower over our vessel. It exhaled a spray of seawater, and its mass displaced the mist. The creature was like to a snake with long flat jaws fitted with 4 rows of backward curved fangs top and bottom. Long tassels hung from its lower jaw, and webbed fins protruded from either side of its face. Its tail was broad and flat, while the sail fin extended down the length of its spine. Slowly its jaw opened as if it were smelling the air through its mouth, and then it hissed low in its throat. The sound vibrated as a deep rattle through my ribcage. It was undoubtedly a warning. Don't move, it'll go for the whale carcass, not us. Even instructed tensely. He didn't need to tell me. I was frozen to the spot, trembling with every heartbeat, as adrenaline pulsed violently through my veins. I couldn't move even if I wanted to. The ship rocked to the side away from the serpent as the water writhed, and I slipped across the deck, crashing into the mast as I realized Even wasn't talking to me. Rather, he was talking to his son, who stood with one hand holding the railing to keep from falling as the ship rolled. You're a coward, father, he replied spitefully. You can't fight that. Watch me. As he spoke, Mercury brought the ring on his thumb upward. It had a hidden spike extended from the side, and he cut the artery of his own throat without hesitation. Blood spurted from the wound at an alarming rate, staining the deck and dripping into the ocean. I had never seen somebody do that to themselves before. The beast before us must have smelt the blood, for its eyes contracted to narrow slits and its demeanor changed from cautious to enraged, as Mercury smiled. He stumbled with the blood loss, then his grip on the railing tightened. An inky darkness leaked from the wound on his neck. It moved like weighted smoke, and blackened lines snaked upward over his face from the underside of his jaw. When the transformation was complete, his eyes glowed unnatural blue. His nails were black, and dark lines followed the contour of his skin. He was beautiful, a god in human form. Mercury took a hold of one of the rigging cables and yanked it free of its securing, breaking off the metal pole that had been attached to entirely. He caught the falling piece of metal in one hand and without hesitation, launched it at the serpent like a javelin. It hit with surprising force, striking the creature just below the jawline and causing it to thrash wildly, sending a spray of ice water over us. Its tail connected with the ship as it disappeared beneath the waves, and the vessel rolled dangerously again. Simon fell from the barrel above overboard, and David at the opposite railing with a sickening crack, before his limp body tumbled over the edge. I tried to catch him as he fell past me, but I missed, and that will forever haunt me. The serpent resurfaced not moments later. Blood ran freely down its scales and it's coiled tight before striking the place where Mercury stood. However, the man moved quickly and its jaw clamped over empty space. The metal bent and the wooden board splintered under the impact of its teeth. Its body coiled against the hull of the ship and a milky substance pumped from its fangs into the deck of our vessel. It was a venom so potent that it melted the wood like acid. However, as it struggled to detach its fangs, realizing that it had missed its target, Mercury circled back. He had taken one of the tipped harpoons and plunged the weapon directly through the serpent's eye. A mass of black energy followed the impact, and the harpoon detonated with a contained explosion within the creature's skull. Only a small amount of fleshy debris sprayed outward through the open cavities of the bone, and the thing became largely still. Its body jerked involuntarily as it gradually slipped back into the water, but it was over. Mercury was by then breathing heavily and glared up at his father. "You see?" he asked coldly. Even returned his son's glare with a hard expression. He looked somewhat disgusted. "It was unnecessary. It wouldn't have attacked if you didn't first." His son snorted. "We're gods, it's our right to do as we please. You cost men their lives. You're the one who insisted on this little trip." The tension between them was tight in the air. "I thought it would help you see reason." Mercury didn't answer, and even sighed as his attention moved to where Captain Eid and Talivard were emerging from below. Both had heavy cuts and bruises, and Roger, who was across from me, holding tight to some riggings, didn't look any better. "Clean up your mess then, no witnesses," Even stated firmly. "Not so concerned about their lives now, Father. You ended their lives the moment you revealed what you are." His son snorted. "What are gods without worshippers?" When Even had mentioned costing lives, I had thought he was talking about Simon and David, but now that I understood, he was meaning all of us. "You know the laws." Mercury ignored him, turning instead to face us. "Do you hear that? My father would like to kill you all, but I will offer you mercy. Bow before me and I'll spare your lives." I didn't need convincing. I knew what they were just as they had known the coin I held was a blessing, and I shakily crawled to my hands and knees, daring not even to look up. However, it seemed I was the only one. Not even Roger, who had seen just much as I, moved to do as he was told. "You'll kill us anyway. You're not gods, you're devils," he hissed. Wrong choice. It was Mercury's calm voice that answered, and I trembled as his footsteps crossed the deck towards us. I scrunched my eyes closed. I knew the chances that he would keep his word were slim to none, and I didn't want to see. Instead, I heard it as the rest of the crew were torn apart. Of course, I'm sure they tried to fight, but against something like the two of them, it was pointless. Heavy drops of remains landed on my clothing, and as all became quiet again, I knew that it was over. Mercury came to crouch before me, and I flinched when he tilted my chin up. "Relax, Timothy, you've made the right choice," he spoke calmly, petting my hair as if I were an animal. "I'll make sure you survive, so long as you worship me forever." I will," I whispered weakly. "Good." "Mercurius, I meant it when I said no witnesses. Kill him." He even spoke up agitated. "No, Father, I've just promised my protection. I can't go back on my word so easily." "Then I will do it." "No." A tense moment of silence passed as the refusal settled between them. "You would fight me over this human." Mercury stood as his father approached. "Actually, I've been meaning to fight you for some time. Your ideals are disgraceful, so I won't turn down the opportunity. I don't want to hurt you, you're my son. As if you could. I surpassed you long ago. You were just too busy playing house to realize it." He even took in a deep breath, as if he regretted what he was about to do. However, Mercury moved faster. He took a piece of splintered wood coated in serpent venom and stabbed it directly into his father's chest, catching the men by surprise. "This is for trying to kill my son. Have fun swimming back to shore, if you can." "You're a monster." For whatever he had said, his son pushed him over the edge of the ship, and he disappeared into the dark water. Right, let's get you out of the cold before you freeze to death. I hope Halivard fixed the engine before I killed him. Mercury smiled pleasantly, offering me a hand. By now the strange markings on his skin had faded and he looked remarkably human again, if not for the blood staining his clothes. The way back felt impossibly long and we didn't speak again. Instead he watched over me the same way a wolf watches a lamb. He chuckled each time that I flinched. Eventually we made it to the whaling station and that was where Mercury left me, alone in the abandoned station. He sank the ship and walked out into the frozen tundra without saying a word more. I waited for 3 days before another crew had arrived. They were surprised to see me, and I told them that our ship had capsized in unusually turbulent seas. When I returned home, I was surprised to learn that a generous amount of money had arrived for me in the form of solid gold blocks. Sitting atop the pile, however, was a single copper coin. I don't think I'll be letting my daughter read these. If you're hearing this, then it means that I escaped. My story is a brutal one, and I'll share it in the style that it was intended to be read, so that you might understand, so that you might see it through the eyes of one who suffered. And please consider this a cautionary tale. It is, I admit, unlikely that you will find yourself in such a situation, but hey, you never know, right? My name is Cater, and I take pride in my work, and I work on the pipes. My current job revolves around an oil pipeline in the Persian Gulf. It's at the very bottom of the sea between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's just gone midday, but unfortunately, we are too far down for the light at the surface to reach us. So my current surroundings are illuminated by nothing more than the yellowish beam of my flashlight. A small collection of bubbles escape from my diving mask. They ripple up and out of sight as I gently kick my flippers, slowly propelling myself through the gloom. As a worker down here, I am one of 3, but the others are not currently visible to me. My beam lands on the great metal pipe, the one that extends up and into the habitat, a cage-like artificial pocket of air, and down into the depths below. I look down and cast my beam over the pipe's body. The light catches on nothing but the rusted metal, a lone cylindrical obelisk in the watery world around me. I lower the beam and I cast it as far down as it'll go, but all I see are my flippers beneath me gently kicking, and the gray pipe vanishing into the blue-black darkness beneath my feet. A chill passes through my body. I hear the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. Where this vertical pipe connects to its horizontal brother on the ocean floor, there is an enormous metal structure of sorts, one with the purpose of keeping a series of temporary installments attached to the pipe in place. I cannot see this monstrosity at present, but the simple act of knowing that far below lurks a monstrous metal skeleton, waiting patiently beneath my feet. I shiver. They tell tales about this place, about the sea. Tales of malevolent spirits that play tricks on divers. Water Jinn, they're called. These spirits show the divers illusions and distortions to confuse them. They get them deliberately lost as a form of amusement, the tales say. And then depending on the spirit's moods, they either get bored and let them go, or they devour them. Something glitters in the gloom in the corner of my eye, and I wheel around in the water, raising the beam of a flashlight, a gasp escaping into my mask. But the beam lands on nothing more than a school of tiny silverfish. They flitter by and pay me no mind, and I catch my breath. Idiot Cater, I murmur to myself, my voice obscured by the mask. and I kicked my way up through the water, following the pipe towards the habitat's air pocket. I see the water line rippling above me. It draws closer and closer, and I catch sight of flashes of color beyond my comrades. Eventually, I break through the surface, popping off my mouthpiece and raising my mask, shaking my hair as I clamber up onto the little platform that surrounds us. A bench-like apparatus that goes all the way around the inside rim of the habitat. As I said before, I am one of 3. My colleagues are called Amir and Ahmad, and they sit waiting for me, their legs dangling over the side, their flippers dipped in the water beneath. I let out a grunt and a sigh as I take a seat beside them, my own flippers half submerged in the water beneath. It seems almost paradoxical, this little space, a marvel of physics. We sit far below the surface of the sea in the small confines that the habitat provides, and yet we have air to breathe. The habitat is a metal box about 4 meters in width and 3 in height. The air in here is dank and stale, but it is at the least quite breathable. From the center of the water between us, the pipe extends up and into the stagnant air. The pipe is currently corked by an enormous rubber plug, one that we will need to deflate before our shift is over. Its purpose is to prevent the oil inside the pipe from leaking out into the sea. Thanks to the habitat, we can safely remove it now, without risk of environmental damage. The pipe in question goes all the way down to the bottom of the sea in a straight line, and there it splits in 2 and travels horizontally across the seafloor. One end travels north a few miles out from the Saudi Arabian coast, and the other travels south. It's just about wide enough for a man to squeeze down, should an emergency repair need taking place from the inside, but the diameter is not large. I wipe some of the salt water from my face as Amir connects a long black cable to the depressurizer. The end of the cable leads down into the pipe and is connected to the rubber plug. "You see any spirits down there today, Kedar?" Amir asks me as he fastens the seal on the cable. "The Jan al-Bahar," Ahmad chuckles, scratching his beard. His voice, as does Amir's, echoes around the somewhat claustrophobic confines of the habitat. I smile dryly. "No spirits, Amir, just..." I think about the pipe, disappearing down into the darkness far below. I can't quite explain why it gives me the creeps, it just does. "Just what?" Amir asked me. Nothing," I finish. "What about you guys, any spirits?" I turn to Ahmad. "Have you finally caught sight of the Jan al-Bahar?" I wave my hands and fingers, mysteriously teasing him, but Ahmad is undaunted. "You mock, Kedar, but this sea, this ancient sea, if we're going to see one, then it'll be here." He claps his hands together and a small shower of water droplets splash down into the water by our feet. The shimmering blue gateway to the sea below, the sea above, and the ocean all around. "And I tell you what else," he continues, raising a finger. "I did see something." "Oh, here we go," Amir mutters, rolling his eyes. No, listen," Ahmad says hurriedly. "I just listened to this. So there I was right about an hour ago, swimming around near the pipe when I may have gotten a little distracted by a fish." Amir shakes his head and we exchange a glance. "You should have seen it, Amir. A great golden thing." I wanted a better look, so I left the pipe and followed it, just for a short while, and eventually it got spooked and vanished into the blue. Ahmad falters and he rubs his chin. It was actually quite an alarming experience. I turned back to the pipe and of course I saw nothing but the endless void of the ocean. I tried to retrace my steps, but again, there were no steps. I was alone and it was frightening. Amir and myself remained silent. But then, that's when I saw it. I saw them. Ahmad continues, practically jumping on the metal ledge that we're all perched on. "Hey, easy," I say, as I feel myself rattle in time to his jumps. Amir flicks a switch on the depressurization machine. It starts to rumble. Ahmad leans forward, looking between us. Out there in the far distance, I see a trio of shapes. 3 figures like shadows in the gloom. Oh, you should take up poetry. Amir mutters and he flicks another switch. Against my sense of better judgment, I am too engrossed in Ahmad's story to pay attention to exactly what it is that he's doing. What kind of shapes? I ask. What kind of figures? They were like smoke, except no, more like mist maybe. Thick, dense mist, with eyes that flickered pale like refracted sunlight. You had to look a certain way to see them. Ahmad's voice drops low and becomes wistful. I saw them only for a second or two and then they were gone. Vanished. How'd you get back to the pipe? I ask. Did the spirits show you the way? Amir chuckles. Oh, well, no, I just used the compass, Ahmad says. But that's beside the point. I saw something, I know that I did. I thought the spirits were supposed to be dangerous, Amir says. The stories always tell of how cruel they are. They play pranks on divers like us, you know. They bang on the pipes. They groan and moan from the inside. Makes you think that there are monsters inside, waiting to burst right out and get you. Well, maybe that's why they appeared to me, Ahmad says thoughtfully, and then gestures to the pipe between us. Maybe they were trying to warn us. Perhaps there's a monster in the pipe. Amir snorts. Don't be ridiculous. Maybe once the plug is deflated, Ahmad says softly, maybe the beast will spring right out. And where would we go? We are effectively trapped down here when you really think about it. There is a moment of uncomfortable silence, broken only by a slow hissing produced by the depressurization machine as it begins its work deflating the plug in the pipe. Psh, Amir says after a beat, shaking his head. Don't say such stupid stuff. What nonsense. All I'm saying, Ahmad finishes shrugging, is that the spirits aren't necessarily something to be feared. I know you guys don't really believe, but they can be helpful too. They don't devour people. The Jan al-Bahar, mischievous maybe, but not unkind in their own way. Amir grunts and waves his hand dismissively. Ahmad looks at me for support and I just laugh. Come on, I say. Enough is enough, I think. We have work to do. Wouldn't want Zahir to snitch on us again. The conversation shifts and a collective groan echoes around the habitat. I can't stand that guy, Amir says dramatically, and we all laugh. Our collective dislike of the man has become a running joke between us. Zahir is technically a colleague of ours, and although we rarely work in close capacity, his projects always seem to be in tandem to our own, so we're never quite rid of him. He has thick red hair and a ridiculous scraggly beard, and all in all he makes himself an easy target. A busybody and a teacher's pet, you see. He clocks in more hours than he has to, unpaid I might add, yet despite his enduring and tragic efforts, he always gets passed up for promotion because he has a vacuum for a personality. Zahir is entirely devoid of charisma. Maybe we should play a prank on him before we go up, Amir suggests, as the machine deflating the plug kicks up a gear. The hissing grows louder. What kind of prank? Ahmad asks. I don't know. We could head over to his site at Azrak 1, bang some pipes and make some noise. Give him a little spook before his shift is over. It could be fun. Nah, it wouldn't be worth it, I reply. As much fun as that sounds, Azrak 1 is 1.5 kilometers away. Do you really want to swim all that way for some childish prank? And besides, we would never fool Zahir with his spirit BS. The man doesn't believe in anything. He has no imagination. True, Amir nods regretfully. He fiddles with the machine beside him and he gives it a light slap. And it does its job. It finishes deflating the plug to a sufficient degree, freeing up a space around it and opening a way down into the pipe. What this was supposed to do was to allow us to reach in, haul the deflated plug out and check for leaks, damage, and whether the plug needs a potential replacement. We should have been able to do this easily and safely, as the pipe at this time and on this day is supposed to be filled with oil. But for whatever reason, the pipe is not. There is, as it turns out, significantly less oil inside than we were told, and was believed. And so what happens instead takes place over the course of a few terrible seconds. A true nightmare that I would never ever be able to forget. The positive pressure inside the habitat, the little atmosphere keeping us alive, rushes instantaneously into the pipe and forces down the small amount of oil at a monstrous and inhuman speed. This motion creates what I can only describe as a blinding vortex. The air and the ocean are hauled up and around like a sudden whirlwind of chaos and terror in the blink of an eye. My vision is lost to a brutal and immediate rush of darkness as my body is slammed into the habitat wall. I scream, but all that I produce is froth and bubbles as my shoulder cracks on the edge of something metal. I don't know which way is up or down. The safety and the sanctuary of the habitat is shattered. I can see nothing but shadow as water blasts into my nose and my mouth and eyes, and I'm sucked instantly and brutally down into the pipe. I can feel its walls pressing against me on all sides, and I'm dragged cataclysmically between them. I am forced through the water and the oil headfirst at near breakneck speed. Blood rushes to my head as my arms and legs are smashed and battered against the metal. There is only terror, and darkness. My head strikes against the metal as the pipe levels out, and the world behind my screwed shut eyelids flashes red and then white. A ringing echoes in my ears and competes with the thunderous rush of the water as I release an involuntary bellow of pain. Oil and seawater pour into my mouth, my lungs, and I swallow some and breathe in the rest, choking and drowning as I'm dragged through the pipe along the seafloor. I'm going to die. This one singular thought plays over and over in my head. I'm going to die, and this is the end. The terror of my situation for a quick fleeting moment is replaced by an eerie calm. The sounds of the rushing, hammering water do not lessen, but I find my attitude changed. It soothes me, and I think about a beach that I visited as a young child with my family, as I prepare to take my final breath. Except, instead of producing bubbles as I do so, I instead begin to choke and to splutter. I start to cough. Spluttering, coughing, and I realize at once that this can only mean one thing. I have found air. I gasp and retch. I try to bring my hands up to my mouth, but they bang painfully against the inner wall of the pipe. My right wrist throbs angrily, sending shards of pain shooting up my arm. I think the entire hand may be broken. Air, I think to myself, and the vision of the beach is lost. The terror floods immediately back into my mind in the same manner as the water was hauled into the pipe. Most of my head is submerged in the water, though my eyes and nose and mouth are free. If I lift my head, then my ears are raised above the waterline and I'm able to hear, but the action presses my forehead against the cold metal above me. I've stopped moving, and the reality of my situation suddenly sets in. I'm in the pipe. Oh no, I murmur aloud, retching as I cough up water and oil. Oh no, I scream. I slam my good fist against the metal, shouting for help. Please, I scream into the pitch black darkness. Please, someone, Amir, Ahmad. Panic strikes. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to turn, and no one to hear me. I can barely move. The water ebbs and sloshes around my face and I gasp. My breathing becomes shallow and dangerous. You're not drowning, I have to keep telling myself. You're not drowning. You have some air, you can breathe. You can breathe, calm yourself. Calm yourself, Kadar. I try to raise my legs and one of my flippers kicks against the roof of the pipe. I try to turn a little to my side and realize that to do so requires significant effort and a reasonable degree of pain. I have done some serious damage to my shoulder and my neck too, perhaps. The simple act of raising my head causes immense pain to shoot down my spine, but to allow my head to lower completely would mean the majority of my face is submerged. I force myself to slow my breathing. That's the priority. Nice steady breathing. In and out, slow, deep breaths. With grunts of pain and a hammering heart, I shuffle and twist as best I can, searching my person for my scuba equipment. I believe that I'm only wearing a single flipper now. The other must have been torn off as I was sucked into the pipe. No other equipment can be found. My breathing mask in the air tank, it's all gone. It's gone. Oh God, I whisper, and despite my sense of logic, I bang against the pipe. Hello, I shout into the inky darkness. Hello, is anyone there? Kadar? Comes a voice from a little ways back along the pipe. It echoes from the darkness beyond my feet. I try to raise my face a little higher to look down into the void, but it's futile. I can see nothing. Hello? I shout back. Who is it? Ahmad, are you alright? Kadar, he shouts, a relief tempered with terror. You're alive. I can breathe. Are you okay? Another voice echoes from beyond, even Ahmad. It is fainter, but I can still hear. Guys, comes the voice of Amir. Guys, are you both alright? Oh, thank the Lord, I mutter, holding back a sob of relief. Amir, Ahmad, it's Kadar. Are you hurt? Yes, Amir calls after me. I believe one of my arms is broken. Likewise, Amir shouts, and then a little quieter. I think my legs are too. Oh God. He releases what sounds like a cry of pain and then swears. What do we do? Ahmad calls into the pipe. What do we do? He kicks against the pipe, and the sound reverberates down and over my head. Okay, hold on, just hold on. I shout, clenching my hands into fists, thinking, using my overheating brain as best as I can. The three of us are all alive. We're trapped in the pipe at the bottom of the sea. No one knows that we're down here, and once they find the wreckage of the habitat, they'll probably assume that we were killed instantly, cast out into the sea perhaps. I feel the panic returning. I try to stretch out my limbs, but I'm unable. I kick the pipe in frustration and let out a shout of rage. Kadar, calm down, calls Ahmad. It's all right, we'll be all right. Yeah, I need to calm down. First things first, the pipe, when it reaches the sea floor, it splits into two. I don't know if we've been pulled north towards the side of Azrak 1 or south towards the side of Azrak 2. How far away are they? I try to think. Azrak 1 is situated around 1.5 kilometers north of our former location at the habitat. Azrak 2 is over twice that distance south. I have no idea how far along we were pulled down the pipe. It all happened so fast. We could be hundreds of meters in either direction by now. All I know is that the air we're breathing and the pocket created is likely due to the undulations in the pipe. Small bumps and raises over support beams. It's entirely possible that there are more of these further down the tunnel, but how large is each air pocket, and at what point do they run out? Okay, I shout down. Friends, I have an idea and we don't have time to waste. All ears, brother, Ahmad calls up. There's a moment of silence. Amir, Ahmad calls down. Yes, he replies weakly. I'm here, but I'm not in good shape. I'm going to be honest. Hey, it's okay, I shout, forcing my own confidence to grow, believing in hope for us, for the sake of my friends if not for myself. We're gonna be alright, just listen. I clear my throat and the sound bounces off the pipe above me and back into my face. I raise my head to clear my ears from the water and I wince from the pain. We need to move, I shout simply. We cannot stay here or we'll die. Any further pressure changes and the pipe could fill with water to the brim. And regardless, sooner or later we'll use up all the oxygen and we will suffocate. So I propose this. We do our best to move. We shuffle our way along the pipe as far as we can. If we're in luck, we've been pulled north and we don't know how much distance we've already covered. Azrak 1 is 1.5 kilometers away at the max. That's a distance that we can make, I'm sure of it. And if we've been pulled south, Amir calls. To this, I remain silent. The sound of something low and deep reverberates along the pipe. Then shakily, Ahmad replies, "All right, Kedar, I'm with you. We do this. We crawl our way along the pipe and we pray." "Amir," I call down, "what do you think?" He coughs and groans. "Kedar," he says, "look, I can barely move. I can't do this." "You can," Ahmad shouts out. "You can." "No, Ahmad." Amir groans again. "My injuries are bad. I can't move more than an inch. I'm going to have to wait behind." "We can't leave you behind." Ahmad splutters, but Amir interrupts. "Go," he says. "And once you've escaped, you'll know where to find me. Just go, all right. You said yourselves the clock's ticking. So go." I hesitate and then release a long and shuddering sigh. "God save you, brother," I call down. "We'll be back, I promise. We won't leave you." "I know," he says, his voice distant and quiet. "God," I mutter angrily, slamming my fist against the pipe. "Ahmad, are you ready?" There's a pause. "Yes," he says. "I'm right behind you, Kedar. Let's do this." And so we begin our venture. Excruciatingly claustrophobic does not even begin to cover it. The knowledge that beyond these narrow confines is nothing more than the great weight of the ocean does not fill me with bravery. Every inch that we travel requires an exertion. I find little to no leverage on the wet, slippery, and oil-soaked base of the pipe, so I have to find the slightest and narrowest of grooves, mostly around the upper half, and press my toes or heels into them, using my one good hand and my one broken hand to help force myself along through the sloshing, sinister waters. I can see nothing. There is no level of light at all for my eyes to adjust to, so in pitch darkness we remain. As we move, I try my best to keep track of the distance traveled. My estimate, I think, is reasonable after 2 or 3 meters. After 10, my grasp is feeble, and beyond that I simply lose track. It's impossible to tell. We just keep shuffling our way down the pipe, listening to the sounds of our breathing, occasionally calling down to each for reassurance, Ahmad and I, slowly and steadily through this underwater pipe, inch by agonizing inch. It's tough to tell how much time passes, but after around 20 minutes, I make a disturbing discovery. It was gradual at first, so gradual that I did not notice, but there is now a significant stress placed on the back of my neck. I'm having to hold my face as high as I can, and my forehead has been pressed against the metal for a while now. It is only when I have to alter the shape of my lips to inhale the air that I realize we're running out. I suppress a wave of panic and I stop moving at once, shuffling back the way that I came to give myself a little more airspace to work with. Water sloshes in my ears and obscures my hearing, but I call down to Ahmad. "Ahmad," I call. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," he shouts back, coughing. "Everything all right?" "Ahmad," I falter. "Ahmad, we're about to run out of air." There's a pause. "What do you mean?" he asks, his voice higher and more anxious. "I mean the air pocket is about to expire." Another pause. "Maybe there's another one further down. I've seen the schematics of the pipe. The undulations are not regular, so there could be another pocket." "But what if there isn't?" I shout back, chest now rising and falling desperately. God. There is no space, no light. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. "Get a hold of yourself," Ahmad shouts, and it cuts through the madness. I seize hold of his words and allow them to anchor me. "We can do this, brother." I take a deep breath. "All right," I say. "All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna move as fast as I can along the pipe. I'll hold my breath and I'll search for an air pocket. Regardless of whether I do or don't, I'll be back to let you know, okay? You're a brave man, calls the voice of Ahmad. Don't overdo it, good luck. Okay, I say, heart pounding. I begin to take a series of slow and deep breaths, gently and gradually expanding my lungs, preparing them to hold for as long as they're able. The sound is cold and eerie in the darkness. Steady and deep breaths. My chest rises and falls. I shuffle back along the pipe, my face pressed against the pipe, the air metallic and oily and grim. I can't hear anything now. The water comes all the way up to the sides of my lips. Shaking, I press my hands against the sides, doing my best to ignore the pain shooting through my right hand wrist. Here we go, Cater. I take my final breath in, my lungs filled to their maximum capacity, and I brace myself against the pipe, using my hands and feet to push myself further along. The air is lost and I'm completely submerged beneath the water. It forms a constant, steady roaring rumble in my ears. I use anything that I can to increase the distance that I'm able to move. My elbows, my knees, heels, my shoulders. I use them all to search for leverage. Inch by inch, faster than before, I force myself through the pipe. My heart pounds. The beat is loud, so loud. My chest trembles, but I keep moving as far as I can, inch by inch, inch by inch. Don't panic. If you don't find air, then there's really nothing for us. We'll suffocate or drown or worse in the belly of the pipe, and we may never be discovered. I have to keep moving, inch by inch. My hands reach a particularly oily section of the pipe, and instead of pressing against the sides, they slip right off. In a blink, my momentum is lost, and I fumble and splutter in terror as I realize that my means of propulsion have now failed me. No, I think with flashes of terrible urgency. No. Bubbles unseen escape from my lips as I writhe in the darkness, suffocating in the cold embrace of the rusted beast. Please, I beg, sending up prayers to a god that I have neglected, desperately searching for a workable surface. My foot finds a subtle groove and I'm able to push myself another inch, and from there I'm able to move another. My journey continues, but I am rewarded with no relief, because soon I will need to breathe in. My lungs have already begun to ache, and if I don't find another pocket of air, then I'll have to return through the pipe, back the way that I came, back past these slippery and oily walls. What if I get stuck on the way back? What if I don't get back in time? How the heck was this allowed to happen? I am overcome with a sudden burst of rage and bubbles spill through my clenched teeth as I force myself deeper and deeper through the water. As hastily as I'm able, my lungs start to burn. I'm going to run out of air. Just a little further, I can surge a little further. I'm going to run out of air and I'm going to die. Just a little further. I can do it. I know I can do it. And with a sudden gasp and a great shuddering breath inwards, I almost laugh in desperate thankfulness as the angle of the pipe is subtly changed, and I feel my face emerge into a fresh new pocket of air. It is not fresh, of course, but in that moment it's the sweetest air that I've ever tasted. I come to a stop and allow some great and rasping breaths, filling and replenishing my lungs. Thank God, is all that I can murmur, over and over. Thank God, I calm myself. And once I have my breath, I try shouting. I don't think that he'll be able to hear me, but I try anyway. I receive no response, so I try knocking a rhythm on the pipe. There is still no response, so regretfully, I prepare for the return journey. I'm scared, of course, but I now know that it can be done, that there is air waiting safely for me on the other side. So I fill my lungs once again and shuffle back through the pipe, feet first this time back towards Ahmad's location. I use the material of my diving suit to help me pass by the oily section, and I emerge back into the former pocket, spluttering and coughing. Oh, good lord, Ahmad shouts. Kadar, you took your time. I thought you might have. It's all right, I reply. We can make it. There's another pocket ahead. Now listen. And I go on to explain the distance and what he'll need to do. And then finally, for the third and hopefully final time, we force ourselves through the watery darkness, back beneath and through the pipe, with the promise of the next air pocket, our guiding light. Inch by inch, as fast as I can, praying that Ahmad is able to keep up. And then as before, my face emerges into the new air pocket, but I continue moving along to allow space for Ahmad. The seconds pass, and just as I'm beginning to fret, I hear his coughing, the sound of great lungfuls of swallowed air as he breathes it in. Yes, I shout, banging my good fist on the pipe. We did it, brother. Yes, he splutters. Yes, we did. And then he releases what sounds like a laugh, and it fills my heart with hope. Come on, I shout to him. Let's keep on going. And so we do, on our journey through the pipe. Inch by inch as the hours pass by, the timeless hours in the perpetual watery darkness. My joints ache, my muscles are tense and throb with exertion, but I have to keep going. There's nothing else for it. Our air pocket comes to an end, and as with before, I scout ahead. I have to, of course, as there's simply no way possible for Ahmad to pass me by. After holding my breath for another painful period of time, I am blessed with the discovery of a new breathable space, and so we continue in the same manner. These air pockets, however, grow shorter and shorter as we progress, much to my quiet alarm, but there's still just enough, and so our journey continues. Every time that I have to hold my breath and go on ahead, it is a cruel exercise in willpower and mental strength, but I do my duty. I have to. We have to get out. We have to get out. An exhausting struggle through the pipe comes to a temporary halt as we reach an air pocket, a mere 3 or 4 meters in length. I start with fright as my bad shoulder knocks up against something hard and cold. It moves a little in response to the pressure that I exert upon it, so it isn't a blockage of any kind. Could it be? My heart leaps. Wriggling, squirming in the pipe, I do my best to bring my good hand up towards my head. It is not a quick process and requires some uncomfortable maneuvers, but eventually my hand can reach my neck and beyond, and my fingers explore the mysterious object. Despite everything, a grin spreads across my face and I cry out loud with joy. Ahmad, I shout. Ahmad, I found a tank. I think, yes, it's all connected. It's all here. A tank, he replies. What do you mean? I mean an oxygen tank, Ahmad. It's all in one piece. The breathing tube, yes, it's all here. That's fantastic, he exclaims. How many are there? My enthusiasm drops. I shuffle further down the pipe, searching blindly in the darkness for evidence of a potential second set of diving gear. Despite my silent pleas, however, there's only one. I can only find one here, I tell my comrade. But there might be another one further down. This is a game changer. We can do this. We can get out. Whose tank is it, Kadar? Ahmad asked me. I think my own was about half full. Yes, likewise, I reply. What about Amir's? Amir's, Ahmad begins hesitating. Kadar, I think that Amir's was almost empty. I take a deep breath. Right, I reply. Well, still, this will help. I'll use it now and I'll see if I can find another set a little further along. Wish me luck. Good luck, man, Ahmad says. Godspeed. I check the tank over as best I can. I hold the mouthpiece around my lips, giving it a few test breaths, and then on I go. Back beneath the water, though this time armed with the tank to help me along my way, I grunt and shift my body around, shuffling through the pipe, squirming my way along, and I find what will come to be the final air pocket of its type. a mere meter long, not even big enough for Ahmad and I to share at the same time. And to my growing frustration, there's no sign of a second tank. And so I push deeper, onwards through the pipe, breathing with the tank, pushing it along with me as I go. I discover to my bitter amusement what could well be my second missing flipper, but there is still no second tank, and no further air pockets either. Clenching my fist, I realize that I need to go back before Ahmad starts worrying, so I make the painstaking return journey in a time that to my friend must feel like hours. But at last, I return to our shared location and inform him of the disappointing news. He is quiet as I relay my findings, and then he says in a soft voice, "Kedar, I think that this is the end of the road for me. There's no use in me going any further. I think that I'll have to wait here." I begin to protest, but my words die in my mouth. I mean, what is there for me to say? He's right, of course. It's a harsh truth, but he's absolutely right. He'll simply have to stay behind. The next leg of the journey I'll have to do alone. A sudden rush of emotion swells up inside me and I force it back down. There's a time and a place. I try not to consider the fact that this may be the last time that I'll ever hear his voice. Perhaps I've heard both of their voices for the very last time. No, time and a place, keep moving. "Ahmad," I begin, fumbling for some words that'll do the moment justice, but he interrupts. "See you soon, buddy," he says in the dark. I'm not able to reply immediately, but when I do, I say to him, "Yes, for sure. See you soon, buddy." And with that, I'm gone. I force myself further along the tank, crawling and shuffling, and I'm submerged. My breathing is loud through the tube connected to my mouth, and when I reach the final air pocket, I allow myself a second to pause, to steel my constitution, and then this pocket too was left behind. On I go, underwater. The rest of my journey will be underwater, and since I cannot see, there's no way to tell how much air is left in the tank. If it was mine or Ahmad's, then I should have hours to spare. If it was Amir's, well, no point in being coy. If it's Amir's, then I'll likely die down here, unless I'm blessed with another surprise air pocket. It's not impossible, I tell myself as I crawl through the pipe, water all around me. It's not impossible. And yet as the hours go by, there are no more air pockets to discover, just more pipe, the endless claustrophobic dark of the tunnel. How far have I come? No idea, it's impossible to tell really, and I don't even know which way I'm heading. If it's north, then there's hope. If south, then this whole venture was pointless anyway. I'll never make it to Azrak 2. Azrak 1, on the other hand, for Azrak 1, hope remains. There's still hope. Onwards through the pipe. Through the oily and poisoned water, my elbows burn with pain from the friction. My shoulders have been rubbed raw, my feet are developing painful blisters from the places that I've been forced to press them against the pipe for leverage, over and over. And my neck is killing me. It hurts to turn my head too far in either direction. I just grit my teeth and keep on going. It's too late to stop now, I must keep going. On and on and on. God give me strength, I mutter to myself as my muscles contract and sting. Give me strength to see this through. Thinking about Ahmad, about Amir, all alone just like me, it helps propel me forwards. I can't give up, not while they're counting on me. I could never do that. I could never do that to them, not ever. And so on I go. Endless, ceaseless dark. Endless, ceaseless torture of the pipe. Except it's not endless. Not as luck would have it. The good news regarding my oxygen tank is that it definitely wasn't Amir's. If it was, it would have expired by now. The bad news is that I've been needing deeper and deeper breaths to fill my lungs. And soon the oxygen that the tank can spare me just won't be enough. It won't go on forever. I have found no other tanks along my journey. It's just the one on my person currently, and then that's it. Game over. Come on, you pipe. I hissed through the mouthpiece. You can't go on forever, you can't. And of course it doesn't. My head bashes against hard metal. Huh? I murmur in confusion. I try to continue on along my journey, but the way is blocked. I simply cannot go any further. My first thought is one of panic. I fear that I have reached some kind of wall in the pipe, one that shouldn't exist. That I've come all this way to find nothing more than a dead end. Upon a little inspection, however, I realize that a space has opened up above my head. I squirm around, and for the first time in hours and hours, I'm able to change positions and to sit upright. My back cracks and a rush of unbelievable relief and muscle tension flows through me. I bring up my hands to feel around me in the darkness, and I almost shout for joy. The pipe has reached its end. It's going up now, vertically, up through the sea towards the surface. We came north, I laugh, the cracks of hope widening, flowing into me like rivers of silver. We've been traveling north the whole time. The end of the pipe. Upwards now. Upwards to the installation at Azrak 1. Into salvation. Unless I take stock and consider the choice that now faces me. If I'm going to push onwards, then this really is it. It's a coin flip for life or death. There's not much air left in the tank, and if I climb this pipe to discover the worst, if this pipe has been stoppered or plugged, then definitively for me, there will be no way out. I really will reach a dead end. All hope will be lost, and I'll drown down here with nowhere to go. No way forwards and no way back. I shake my head. There's no choice here, not really. It's all willpower. I don't have enough air in my tank to get back to Ahmad even if I wanted to. It's only forwards, forwards, and upwards. All right, I murmur, bubbles spilling. Here we go. And I begin my slow and deliberate ascent. Back pressed against the pipe behind me, knees and calves against the pipe in front. Up I go, kicking at times, half swimming, half shimmying up the pipe to the surface, slowly but surely, grimacing through the strain and the pain. And still it's so dark, so unbelievably dark. The lack of light does not fill me with confidence. If the pipe was not stoppered, surely I would be able to see some light, right? I open my eyes in the water. The salt and the oil stings like crazy, but I need to see, or try to see at the least. But there's nothing. There's no hint of light at all. And don't lose faith, I tell myself, screwing my eyes tight shut again. Just keep going. This vertical section of the pipe is unlike the one that we were sucked down. This part here goes all the way up to the surface, up to the bustle and the relative commotion of Azrak 1. Except it won't be bustling right now, of course. I hesitate, taking a deep, strained breath through the mouthpiece, grunting with the strain. Thinking about it, the place could be entirely deserted. I don't even know what time it is. I've been crawling through the pipe for hours upon hours. I'm not sure of the exact time, but I'm exhausted. I'm starving and my oxygen is about to expire. If I recall correctly, in fact, the site won't even be open tomorrow. I rack my brains and try to remember. When are they all off site? Was it tomorrow or was it the day after? What if everybody's gone back to shore? What if the site's empty, and what if nobody's there to hear me? What if the pipe is stoppered? What if? I bellow in frustration and continue my ascent. Each breath becomes hard work. I'm starting to feel lightheaded, but there's nowhere to go but up. And this section of the pipe can't be longer than 80 meters or so. So surely if it was open I would see the light, right? Wouldn't I see the light? Please, I whisper, as I open my eyes again, squinting through the darkness. Terrified that at any second I'll hit a barrier or a stopper, and my journey will come to an abrupt and bitter end. Any second, at any moment, I could strike the ceiling and I'll be trapped. In the very next second, I emerge from the water. I hear the sounds of splashing as my head breaks free of the surface of water. I'm still in complete darkness, but I've reached the top. Air. I pull off the mouthpiece and suck it all down, refilling my lungs with far greater ease and rubbing and brushing the oily water from my face and eyes. I made it, I said to no one in particular, my voice echoing around the narrow little space afforded me. But now I have come to perhaps the final hurdle. How cruel would it be, I think, how cruel to make it so far and then to be denied rescue. So close and yet so far. I squirm and bring up my good arm with my good hand. I reach it up above me, feeling through the darkness as the water spills and drips from my elbow. A few inches above my head, I feel the lid of the pipe screwed tight shut. My heart starts pounding again. Come on, please, please. I search desperately for a release mechanism, or a valve that will open the pipe from the inside. But alas, just as I had suspected, there is no such valve. I bring up my other hand and try to force open the lid. I try to spin it to shift it, but nothing works, nothing at all. And there will be no one on the other side. I mean, why would there be? Their shift is over. They'll have all left the site by now, crossed back to the shore. I'm stuck. After everything, I'm just as trapped as Amir and as Ahmad. I start pounding desperately on the lid. I bang on the pipe as hard as I can and I start to scream. I start shouting, though the sounds will be muffled. From the outside, my shouts for help will sound just like a load of moaning and groaning, potentially even mistaken for the general rumble of the pipe itself. Help! I scream, slamming both my fists in the metal with all my remaining force, caring not for these spikes of pain that shoot through my broken wrist. Panic threatens to overtake me, now at this final stage of my journey. Help! I cry, slamming the lid and kicking the pipe, making as much noise as I'm able to before my constitution breaks. Anyone! I roar into the darkness, and with the sound of a great and sudden grinding directly above my head, the lid shifts and a curved crack of light spills blindingly into the pipe. I gasp with astonishment, the wind taken from my sails, and I slump back down into the water with a splash. My eyes are forced closed, and the world beyond my sealed eyelids is a dazzling orange red. I don't even know what to say. I'm too afraid to believe what is happening. I sense somebody talking to me, their voices confused and alarmed, and they grab me by the diving suit by the shoulders, and with some considerable degree of effort, they haul me out and onto the platform that surrounded the pipe's exit. I'm unable to help myself from weeping. I still cannot see, but the tears streak the salt and the oil from my face. I have never felt so free. I turn and wince and stretch my arms and legs in ways that they were unable to for what felt like ages. I feel a hand squeeze my shoulder. A bottle of cool, refreshing, and above all clean water is gently poured over my face. Cater, comes a familiar voice. Cater, what on earth? He fumbles for words. Care to explain yourself, Cater? What is this? I finally manage to open my eyes, just a sliver, gradually, painfully adjusting to the light from the flood lamps all around. And I'm greeted by the sight of the only employee still at his station, long after his shift had come to an end. He stares at me, his scruffy red hair and his beard a mess, his expression almost comical in its confusion. A dry chuckle escapes my lips. Hello, Zahir, I mutter. You know, I don't think I've ever been happier to see anyone in my entire life. And this, my friends, is the truth. The hours that followed passed by in a whirlwind. The company and the authorities were alerted immediately, and the helicopters were sent up into the sky, and rescue boats were out in the water within the hour. The ruined habitat site was investigated and safely secured. Multiple teams of divers were sent down, and they traversed the entire length of the pipe away into the night, knocking and tapping on the metal and hunting diligently for Amir and Ahmad. There was tragically no response. I remember pacing up and down in one of the control rooms, fielding calls from family in the presence of several officers and officials, as the pressure in the pipe was carefully leveled, as it was disconnected at the safest point and opened for inspection. I remember the way that I reacted when I was told the news the next morning. After a long and sleepless night, my arm bandaged. I remember the breath escaping me, and I remember collapsing into the nearest chair. "That's impossible," I murmured. There's no way." But the bodies of Amir and Ahmad were discovered together, about 10 or so meters north from where we were suckered down. It was ruled that the two men had died on impact within the pipe, almost instantaneously. It's likely they weren't even aware of what had happened. Their last conscious moments, I'm told, most probably took place in the habitat itself before the disaster. To this I say nothing. I simply look out the window as the morning sun reflects and glimmers, sparkling in the gentle waves of the sea far below. I write this with the fleeting hope that someone somewhere will be able to help me make sense of it all. All I want are answers, some understanding that would allow me to return to my previous, undisturbed worldview. That lake, sitting just beyond the edges of my yard, had seemed an extension of the home to me. Now I feel as though it looms over me at night, threatening to let loose the unknowable horrors that it holds. Before I was lost in that place, I would take every opportunity to be down at the lake. The water was like a second home, and now it seems so alien and unfamiliar. I will recount my experience to the best of my ability, and all I ask, all I hope is that somebody can help me make sense of this. Please. I feel as though I can't trust my own reality, and the nightmares that fill what little sleep I have gotten have left me exhausted. My family had owned our home in the private community built around Lake Ganad in Massachusetts for longer than I had been alive, and growing up I had spent many summers there, under the watchful eye of my mother or aunt from the docks. My cousins and I would challenge each other to race out into the lake, always pushing the limits to see who could swim out the farthest. I would always win. The water had become a second home to me, somewhere that I found comfort and familiarity. And years later, when my grandparents needed to move closer to my family, the house would come under my care. I had lived here for years without incident, and I had intended for this to be the house that I raised a family in one day. But now, I need to move as soon as I can manage. Every second spent here wears on my nerves, which are already shot, and I can't take it. The sight of the lake. It was overcast the morning that it happened. Fresh drops of dew clung to the grass, which seemed a more lively green than usual thanks to the weather. Spring was practically upon us, though winter was not so far removed, and the stubborn chill that seemed to cling to the air reminded me as much. I shivered involuntarily, pulling the collar of my windbreaker together with one hand, and shoved the other in a pocket as I moved through the backyard, towards the private path that leads to the lakeshore. Except for the birds chirping messages back and forth to each other, I was the only living thing out this early, which was just as I preferred it. I opened the fence that separated my backyard from the path down to the waterfront and made my way down the stone steps, descending the little hill the house sat on, and onto the sandy shore. The familiar sound of water meeting land greeted me, and I made my way over to the tarp on the beach, removing it to reveal the rather old and rather expensive, old handcrafted canoe that had belonged to my grandfather before me. I sucked in air, bending my knees to pull, and began dragging the canoe towards the edge of the water and into its shallows. The frigid water sent a shock up my legs and across my skin, raising goose flesh in its wake. The wind had picked up a bit, enough so that little waves were moving across the surface of the lake. I waited, standing there in the shallows holding the canoe steady, as it bobbed on the surface until just the right little swell in the water, and I raised myself up and into the boat, in as fluid a motion as I could manage, pushing off and away from shore. As if in response, a breeze rolled across the water, carrying the sweet smell of the morning air, bringing an unintentional smile to my face. I settled into the repetitive but relaxing act of rowing, alternating sides and timing my breathing as I paddled forward. Another sudden breeze rocked me, rendering me unsteady for a moment before centering myself again. I frowned slightly, wondering if perhaps I had underestimated the weather for the morning. I had elected to wear my windbreaker but had a little else on other than the swim trunks and sandals that I usually wore on the water, and I was beginning to believe that would not be sufficient. As if in response to my worries, an unexpectedly strong gust of wind whipped from behind, throwing the thin hood of my windbreaker over my eyes and pushing the canoe forward nearly 20 feet. I fought to balance myself against such sudden movement, almost losing my paddle before managing to regain some level of stability. I chuckled nervously to myself, imagining how foolish I must look to any neighbor who happened to be looking outside their window right now, watching me struggle against the air. It was an embarrassing thought and one that made me feel oddly vulnerable alone on the lake. It was that feeling that made me cast a glance back to shore. It was then that I saw the first sign that something was amiss. I had been out on the lake for no longer than 5 minutes, and I was sure that I had seen the shore sooner than that. Still, in seemingly no time, a wall of fog that looked more like thick white smoke had descended over the neighborhood, creeping closer to the lake with every second, until obscuring my view of land entirely. Perhaps the decrease in visibility triggered some animal fear in me, or something deep down inside of me understood the true nature of what was to come. But as the fog drew closer and an eerie stillness fell over the water, the seeds of panic began to take root in my mind. I quickly resolved to return to shore. Being on the water, even a lake as familiar as this, wouldn't be safe with such a lack of visibility, as the fog crept ever closer, bringing with it an unnatural silence that caused the hairs on my back to raise. I reoriented, paddling until I had turned the canoe around in the direction that I had come. By now, my home stood only as a shadow in the mist, which had now almost engulfed the entirety of the lake. I watched as the last visible bit of the dock had disappeared, the fog spilling over it in a way that almost felt purposeful. I shivered, but not from the cold this time, though it felt like the temperature had dropped a few degrees, but rather from the growing sensation of wrongness with the entire situation. It was then, I think, when I first heard it. Had it not been so unnaturally quiet, I probably wouldn't have even heard it over the sounds that I made while rowing. But there, from somewhere in that alien fog, I could have sworn that I had heard a distinct splash. I paused, staying as still as I could manage, drifting silently on the water. There was nothing for a while, but the sound of the canoe floating on the water and my intentionally slowed breathing, as I waited for something to break the strange silence. I waited there for what must have been minutes, met only with silence before eventually giving up and continuing forward. Almost as soon as my paddle had touched the water, the noises returned. A series of repetitive sloshing sounds from somewhere behind me. Confusion quickly gave way to worried realization as the noise became more apparent and less distant with each passing second, and I came to understand what I was hearing. Someone, somewhere in the strange mist that had descended on the lake, was swimming. A creeping sense of unease found itself firmly planted in my mind as I sat there for a few moments, listening to the unmistakable sound of something moving through the water. For a moment I considered calling out, eager to know which one of my neighbors could be out on the water in conditions such as the ones at hand. But the idea of calling into the phantom mist with no real concept of who or what I might be calling out to quickly faded into my mind. I instead returned to paddling, with much added fervor in the direction that I had come, to what I was sure must be the shores leading to my backyard. I don't know exactly when, but at some point, I realized that I had been rowing for far too long. I was as familiar with the lake as it was my own home, and even plunged into the ghostly haze I knew I should have reached land in any direction several minutes ago. I swallowed and tried to force down the great swell of fear rising within me. For every second I went with no sign of land, my movements grew more rigorous and primal, more desperate. "Now come on," I pleaded with the nothingness, begging for it to part and reveal the familiar shorelines behind my home. An ancient cocktail of adrenaline and fear began searing its way through my veins, and within minutes I had started rowing with such an increased wildness that water drenched me as well as the inside of the boat. Time stretched on for a while, as did the lengths of my desperation for every second I progressed without seeing land. At some point an idea occurred to me, one that I tried to stifle at first, but that quickly grew into something close to the irrefutable fact that the longer I spent on that godforsaken water, somehow I knew, even blinded by the fog, I knew that I had left the lake, that I was somewhere else. I didn't want to accept it, I couldn't make sense of it. My mind fought, struggled to reject what I knew to be the truth. Terror gripping my every action, driving me forward with a wild fury. I don't know how long I continued on like that. Panic made the time seem to stretch and condense into something meaningless, and with no visual aid to mark my movements, it could have been a long time. However long, it was enough time for the memory of whatever I had heard earlier to fade to the back of my mind as hysteria took hold of me. It resurfaced, racing to the forefront of my worries when again I heard it. Someone, or as I would come to find, something could be heard moving through the water again, faster this time. My head snapped around in the direction of the sounds, my ears perking involuntarily as whatever was in the water had approached, closing the distance. I froze, terror robbing me of control over my body. As I sat, eyes locked on the mist, waiting for something to break through at any moment. I had only just begun to consider that I was somewhere other than my home, somewhere strange, and for some reason, the possibility of encountering something from wherever that was filled me with a fear that made my stomach turn. For several agonizing moments, the longest few of my life, fear and ignorance made my mind illogical, and my thoughts began to swim with images of unseen horrors leaping out of the mist. My chest began to burn, and I realized that I had been holding my breath. I didn't dare to stop, as the sound is closer now, so close that I can feel the hair down my neck raising, and goosebumps forming along my skin. Slowly a shadow revealed itself, a dark form emerging from the pure haze of nothingness. My heart felt ready to leave my chest as my eyes strained to create something of the approaching darkness. The sound grew slower and the closer it drew, as the image in front of me grew clearer. I let out a breath, relief flooding through me, extinguishing the blazing panic that had gripped me. From the fog, the outline of a person became apparent. I chuckled, an inadvertent smile coming to my face as the realization dawned on me that I must not have been the only person out for an early morning ride on the lake. Sure, it was odd given the time of day, and I couldn't imagine how they could have gotten in without me seeing them, but nothing else made sense. Someone else was stuck here, wherever here was, along with me. The thought gave me some semblance of comfort in a moment steeped in so much fear. It wouldn't last. The person in the mist approached slowly, their figure growing more defined by the second, and I cleared my throat to speak, hoping to dispel the last bit of fear clouding my mind. Hello? My words seemed to hang there on the air, clinging to the phantom-like mist. Somehow the silence that followed seemed denser and more suffocating than before, as my anticipation for a response quickly morphed into regret at my ever having spoken. The figure in the mist continued their advance forward, silent if not for the gentle whisper of the water undertow as they drew closer. I squinted, confusion growing as the dark form in the mist grew more evident, as strange details became more apparent. As the figure closed the distance, question after question sprouted in my mind, each plunging me further into a state of confusion, even more mystifying than the strange fog that I found myself trapped in. Closer and closer it came, and as it drew nearer, unsettling details began to leap out of me, creating an uncanny image of something that I couldn't quite understand. Two in specific disturbed me more than the rest. The first and least striking of the details was the strange way the figure waved at me. The motion was clunky as if made by someone unfamiliar with their appendages, still trying to master their use. It was odd, alien, and uncomfortable, causing me to recoil away from the seemingly friendly gesture. The second and most gut-wrenching of the things I noticed was the figure's boat, or more accurately, lack thereof. It seemed to glide through the water, attached to something just below the surface beyond my vision. The water, when had it gotten so dark? The lake, usually crystal clear and beautiful, was now an inky black that resembled oil more than water. I rubbed my eyes vigorously as if they were solely responsible for what I was seeing, my mind growing even more assured in my assertion that I was now somewhere else, somewhere far away. It was close, how close it was impossible to know for sure, but close enough that it became more and more evident that I was looking at something absurd, something impossible. It descended slowly and purposefully beneath the black surface of the water and out of sight once more. I don't know what I had expected to see. Somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I think that I had already accepted that whatever it wasn't human. But still at that moment, confronted with the reality of the situation so suddenly, all I could think of was an escape. Of escaping that thing, the fog, and the waking nightmare that the lake had become. I don't know how long I went on for after my brush with the thing in the mist. Maybe a few hours, maybe longer. But I became extremely aware of just how tired, hungry, and cold I was. I had been on the water for hours, much longer than I had anticipated that morning, and I had eaten a light breakfast, and not knowing when I would have access to food again, seeming to only make my stomach growl louder and more frequently. So I tried to avoid the thought entirely, though I was unsuccessful, and the idea of starving to death, slowly wasting away into an unrecognizable husk in this unforgiving place, crawled at the back of my mind, slowly eating away at my thoughts, eating away at my sanity. A familiar noise somewhere off to the front of me pulled me from the border of my breaking point. It was a noise that I was used to hearing out in the lake all those times, the stressed creak of the wooden dock, shifting in the moving water. I sprang up, the canoe shifting violently under my weight, the familiar sound breathing new life into spaces previously occupied by hopelessness. I hear it closer now. The sound as familiar as ever close, but still just out of sight. I paddled desperately in the direction of the sound, in the direction of the dock that meant salvation, a return to the world that I knew. I know this doesn't make sense, but the lake knew what I was trying to do, and it wasn't going to just let me. A current, some fit for a busy river, began seemingly out of nowhere, and with every passing moment, the creaking of the dock grew quieter. No, no! I cried out at the lake, which I was now convinced somehow understood what it was doing, and it was doing it on purpose. It was toying with me, and I wouldn't let it. I wasn't thinking, consumed with rage and madness like nothing that I had ever experienced. I lost control. Call it insanity, desperation. In reality, it was likely both, driven by a singular thought and motivation, no matter how illogical. Reach the dock. I don't know what I was thinking. I doubt I was truly thinking at all. I suppose in my mind, the dock being connected to the land represented salvation, a link between the water and the world, and the only hope in my heart that I would ever escape this place and see my home again. It was a flimsy belief at best, but I had devolved past the point of sanity and rational decision, and belief was all that it took to act. I dove from the canoe, which was immediately torn away by the strange current, disappearing into the mist, as I plunged into the dark waters below. The dark water was beyond freezing, its biting cold stinging my skin to the touch, instantly making me regret my decision. It seemed the changes to the water were more than just an aesthetic, and I was beginning to lose the feeling in my fingers and toes. The strange current that had taken the canoe seemed not to be affecting me, though, and with a final burst of frantic energy, I managed to swim until I reached the familiar wooden structure that meant safety. As I pulled myself onto the dock, my heart sank through my chest, disappearing into the depths below. I crawled, every stir of the dock under my weight, serving as a crushing confirmation of what I already knew. A scream, guttural and infuriated, tore through the air, echoing off the water and piercing the fog. It took a few seconds to realize that it was coming from me. My throat was raw and my skull pounded with pain, as I curled up in the center of the dock, floating uselessly in the center of this unknowingly expansive sea of darkness. Now an impromptu raft, my head buried in my legs, hands tangled in my hair. I was alone. The thought rang out so loud in my head that I was certain it had been spoken aloud. I pulled myself tighter, hoping that in this illogical place, perhaps I could make myself disappear if I pulled myself close enough, my heart and mind emptying of hope. It was almost expected when I heard the faint sounds of something in the distance, swimming closer and closer. I forced myself to sit up, staring forward into the mist, which seemed now to be clearing, as a familiar figure began to emerge. I sat up, backing slowly away toward the center of the dock raft, careful not to overturn it. I shivered, and I couldn't tell if it was from the freezing water or the way the feeling in the air seemed to shift with that thing's approach. The fog was fading, and some of the clarity seemed to be returning to the water, though in minimal amounts, revealing aspects of my surroundings to me. I quickly understood that the fog, the inky darkness of the water, was all protecting me, shielding me from the unimaginable reality of the situation. As the last of the mist had dissipated, I felt the last bit of fight left in me drain from my body. I wasn't on the lake anymore. I didn't know if I was still on Earth anymore. The water stretched out in every direction, stopping only where it was met, but the sky, oh that sky, the sky was a deep purple like a bruise, dotted with stars and the 3 massive moons that hung overhead, jarring indicators to just how far I was from anything I had ever known. If not for the situation, for my utter isolation on this alien ocean, It would have been beautiful. Instead, I felt only crushing horror as my mind struggled to process my impossible new reality. A fear that coursed through my veins, filling my body like poison as the figure from the mist was revealed. It's taken me a long time to find an adequate description of the thing that I saw, the thing that had been stalking me through that mist. It's taken me time combing through images of the many awful things in the oceans and lakes of the world have to offer to find something anything like the thing I encountered in that lake. The closest thing that I can compare it to is an anglerfish, that ugly thing with the jagged teeth and the light on its forehead that it uses to attract prey, based on some of its main characteristics. I immediately understood why the figure seemed to glide along the water without a boat, or why it moved so strangely. What I had seen was only a portion of the entire thing. A large, fleshy appendage, human in shape and size, rising upwards and out of the water from the body of something unrecognizable. Its fish-like eyes were large and dark, each the size of a dinner plate, staring into mine with an eerie intelligence that I found almost as horrifying as the rest of its appearance. Other human-shaped appendages grew from along the surface of the nightmare creature, adopting a ghostly quality in the way they move in the water, all reaching and grabbing and snatching for something. The realization dawns on me what it is that they're all reaching for. Me. I can hardly focus on the ephemeral dance of the figures sprouting from the creature and its face, dear God, its face. I couldn't look away. Its head was broad and fish-like with rows of molder-like teeth open and waiting to devour. It was covered in a series of growths, these gray, translucent appendages that appeared purposefully human-shaped. Thin bones ran through the thing's many limbs, responsible for their ability to somewhat articulate. The appendage that had been extending above the water had been made to resemble a person, and the mist reached one of its arms out at me, beckoning me forward. Somehow the act dripped malice, and I realized that it was mocking me. I stared down at the creature, the perverse horror floating just below, waiting to consume me. Its smile grew wider and something flashed behind its glassy eyes. Somewhere inside of me, in the darkest parts of my mind, something was compelled to dive in after it. My head swam as a throbbing pain spread through my brain, threatening to render me unconscious. Its eyes reminded me of the ocean that I was lost in, dark, with something threatening lurking beneath the surface. It was in my head. I could feel it. Somehow that thing from the depths was in my mind, dragging me below mentally. I struggled against the growing desire to let it take me, to be consumed by the beast, putting an end to it all. The thing brought its teeth together, glaring up at me with a stomach-turning smile that completely overtook the lower half of its face. The pain in my head intensified, as did the overwhelming desire to just fall in and end it. I moved forward, the dock beginning to run under my weight, threatening to flip entirely with my every movement. What little sanity remained in me pleaded and screamed for me to stop, to throw myself as far away from the edge, from the abomination awaiting below. It was drowned out by the invading thoughts of the creature, pulling me closer. I inched closer, its smile widened. My fingers met the frigid water first, as I pulled myself forward, closer and closer. Without warning, the dock twisted under my weight, plunging me into the water. I was jolted back to awareness by the sudden burst of adrenaline, fresh terror searing through my veins as the awful realization of what was about to happen overtook me. Panic puppeteered my every move as I thrashed forward, trying desperately to reach the dock, which had again come to represent salvation. Behind me, something began to swim forward. I glanced askance over my shoulder, and any hopes of survival were quickly quelled. The figure above the water was merely feet away, closing in rapidly. I clenched my teeth, stopping in the water and bracing myself. I was going to die in some alien ocean somewhere unthinkable. I would never know why or how I got there, and I was going to die there. The thing in the water seemed aware of my thoughts, and its smile grew even wider in response, as its mouth began to hang open as the distance between us began to disappear. I closed my eyes and awaited the inevitable end. I felt the spray of water as it drew near, and I sucked in a final breath. The following seconds seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I waited for something, for some blinding pain or some bright light as I entered the next life. But there was nothing, just the sound of the lake and my labored breathing. For several agonizing moments I refused to open my eyes, unwilling to confront the sight of that thing again. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear, and I chanced a glance. It was stopped, utterly motionless, just feet in front of me, eerily still. I was frozen, terrified that any movement may send it back into its frenzied pursuit and lead to my death. Something about the look in the eyes of the creature, something that I couldn't quite place, made me feel as though perhaps I could take the chance. Slowly, I began kicking my feet, moving back towards the dock, keeping my eyes locked on that thing. I hit my back against the wood, sending a shock down my spine that instantly gave way to relief upon the realization that I had made it. I quickly pulled myself on top of it, my eyes never leaving the creature, which remained motionless under the water. The thing's smile faded so suddenly that it made my heart drop, and the corner of its mouth curled into a horrible pained grimace. What it did next was the most surprising and would come to be the most immediately foreboding. As quickly as it had appeared, the creature lowered itself into the depths and disappeared. The confusion came as suddenly as the fear had, as I watched that nightmare of a being, a predator of some alien world, disappear. I fell back, a wave of exhaustion taking the place of the adrenaline that had been keeping me going, and I began to turn and survey my surroundings. The fog had mostly cleared, something that I had barely taken mental note of being occupied with the creature from before, and I had yet to actually look around me. Had I looked earlier, I would have sooner noticed why the creature had fled. Land, the only for miles it appeared, only yards away from where I was floating now. Like so much about this situation, something felt wrong about this. For the second time on this lake, the horror quickly revealed itself to me. I thought that it was my eyes at first, maybe a trick of the light in the waning fog, but I had thought that I had seen motion. I blinked once, praying to whatever god was out there to listen, praying for all of this to stop. I think it answered, only it was the god of this place, and it was as evil as everything else here. The island was covered with dark figures, thrashing and fighting and tearing at one another in some sick and frenzied ritual. All at once, the figures stopped, ceasing their vile performance, moving as if united by one mind. All at once, they gathered on the shores of this impossible island, and I could see what they truly were. They were humanoid, bipedal, 2 arms, all of that, but they were far from human. Their skin was a sickly gray color with webbed hands and massive dark eyes, like those in the creatures from the depths. They chittered and clicked, flooding forward and off of the island in droves, a descending army of angry and hungry mouths. For a few seconds before the fresh fear took hold, I wondered if these things were the results of what happened if you stayed here, lost in this place for too long. I imagined myself a mindless animal gnashing and tearing at the others on the island, and I shuddered. I would prefer death. They spilled forward, and my heart quickened in preparation for the inevitable. I would be ripped apart by these creatures, the people of the lake, and the horror of that was one I was accustomed to. But what followed I wasn't prepared for. It began with the water, which vibrated at first, then started to quake, waves starting to form along its surface. I had hardly noticed at first, only realizing what was going on when the creatures in the water ceased their press forward, chittering and cackling with such intensity, it filled me with a dread that I hadn't known I could experience as of yet. And then it shifted. I can't explain how I felt, what it was like watching it. The mass that had been home to the creatures, the island that had appeared so suddenly, it shifted. The fog had ceased its retreat, pulling around the mass in the water ominously. I glanced at the creatures in the water. They had stopped their pursuit entirely, instead collectively turning their attention towards the shifting mass. Something resembling fear on their faces, faces which I now realized very much resembled the creature that I had seen earlier. Another shift, more significant than before, encouraged a series of excited shrieks and cries from the creatures, who began thrashing, hooting, and yelling in some jubilant celebration. The island begins to rise. The nightmarish cacophony from the creatures in the water rose to a fever pitch, as the shadow of a behemoth stretched from the water to the sky, all under cover of that fog. The dock was lifted and thrown by a sudden wave of displaced water, tossed into the air. For a few moments, time seemed to slow. I watched the strange alien ocean descend into discordant waves, as angry dark clouds poured out of the fog surrounding the colossal creature, threatening to unleash what it had. I saw the legions of creatures, almost human but still something so different, as they watched it all unfold, unable to gauge their emotions now. I don't know how high up I was thrown, but when I connected with the water, it felt like hitting pavement. A ringing sound had filled my ears, which only took in a lungful of water by mistake. Disoriented, I struggled to find direction, my lungs burning as I tried to navigate my way to the surface. I managed to find my way up by some miracle, gasping for air, my vision blurry. The scene that came into focus was the least explainable of all. The creatures were rising from the water, or being pulled is a more accurate description of what I saw. In a stream of bodies thrashing and struggling against some invisible power tearing them from the lake, the behemoth had reached its full height, its hulking figure towering above the water and into the purple skies above, enveloped in that strange fog. From the highest point of the beast, where a head should have been, a brilliant light began to beam, forcing me to avert my eyes for a moment. I squinted, watching as these smaller creatures began to disappear into the light. It's hard to tell exactly, but I get the feeling their excitement was gone, replaced with fear and confusion no different than my own. They had seemed to worship the behemoth, to revere it, which left me to wonder if this thing shrouded in fog and clouds was the awful god of wherever I was. The light began to intensify, emitting a palpable heat, and forcing me to look away. I didn't want to see it, to feel it rummaging through my mind like the creature from before had. The water around me had become increasingly violent, and the weather had followed suit. A lightning and an array of unusual hues coloring the sky in a spectacle that was as beautiful as it was horrifying. I was tossed around, unable to avert my gaze from the behemoth that I found myself staring into the clouds above, into the lights that the monster emitted. I guess it's impossible to know for sure, covered in the clouds like that. I couldn't have seen what it was really doing, but I felt it. In my mind, I felt it. It turned and looked at me. I was covered in something like a massive spotlight blinding me, filling my mind with images of voyages taken on an alien sea. I saw crews throughout the ages across time and space, setting sail on oceans and lakes, taking swims in rivers and creeks, on Earth and worlds that I didn't recognize, all finding themselves in the same situation, lost in a storm or a strange and sudden fog, soon to find themselves stranded on an alien ocean, all meeting the same fate, one by one falling victim to unknown and possible horrors, lost forever in this place. I could feel my mind beginning to collapse under the sheer amount of information, and the images that followed fractured it completely. I couldn't take any more. I couldn't take the overload of information. Listen to the screams of former victims of this place. I would rather die. I pulled away from the light of the behemoth, pulling myself towards the dark depths of the ocean. I fought against the urge to turn back to return to the surface, fighting off the images of monsters in the depths awaiting me. Anything, even the creature from earlier with its ominous smile, was better than another moment in the light of the behemoth. The water began to vibrate, and somehow I heard something, a sound like a tremendous horn blowing, shaking the very fabric of the universe. I knew that it was the colossal monster above. I knew what it wanted: to pull me into its light. I didn't know what would happen if it was successful, but I knew it was likely a fate worse than death. I felt it pulling at me mentally and physically, trying to tear me back to the surface. My lungs felt as though they were on fire, but I used every bit of strength that I had left to drag myself closer and closer to the depths. I could feel the water rising, being pulled into the air by the behemoth, the terror of which made me only swim faster. My vision darkened with every second as I continued my swim into oblivion. Another rumble through the water. I feel myself beginning to fade as thoughts and memories of my family begin to fill my mind. I was going to die, and I had accepted this, but at least it would be on my own terms. I closed my eyes, feeling the last bit of my strength leaving me, as the instinct to take a breath took over. And then I felt it, a pull from beneath, familiar from before, a strange, inexplicable current like the one that had taken my canoe, pulling me lower. I didn't fight, and the riptide tore me down at incredible speeds, almost giving me whiplash. I was whipped around with blinding force, at the mercy of these strange sentients behind the current. It continued on like that until slowly the world faded away and I opened my mouth to take in a breath. The last thing I saw as I was turned around was a light beaming from the surface, staring down at me, through me. I expected darkness and instead was greeted by nightmares, tumultuous dreams of being torn apart by grinning beasts and taken by ancient gods. I woke up to bright light and instantly turned to flee, before realizing something that made me cry tears of relief. I was on land. I sat up, my eyes adjusting to the sun in the blue sky, our sun. I leaped back, feeling the cold water of the lake on my foot. I crawled away, recoiling as if from a hungry beast, and in a way, I guess it was. I rose to my feet, stumbling at first as I regained balance, before turning and running around the shore and back to the path, back to my home. Even as I finished this, I'm at war with myself about posting it, about risking sounding insane. I suppose it doesn't matter if there's any forum that should be receptive to my experience. I imagine that it's this one. I don't know what to think about my experience. I'm grateful that I survived, though I'm left struggling with traumas that I can't possibly bring to a therapist. In the meantime, if there is anything to take from my experience, it's that if there's ever a fog in the air or a strange storm overhead, you should avoid the water. If you don't, you just might find yourself somewhere else. My name is Gabrielle Fisher. 6 months ago, my wife Elizabeth went missing at a beach along the Gulf of Mexico. We had gotten married only 6 months earlier, and 3 months after the wedding, I was deployed at sea with the Navy. When I was alerted of her disappearance, I was on a helicopter back to land within 24 hours. Another 8 hours after that, I was in southeastern Texas, chasing all of the leads that the police wouldn't. The peculiar thing about her disappearance is this. She was reported going to the beach at about 7 p.m. on a Monday evening with 4 of her friends. There was an unrelated group of 3 people that also went missing at around the same time, reportedly going to the same beach within the same hour. In these 6 months since, not a single one of them has been seen or heard from again. In fact, many people that take late-night visits to that beach, or any beach in the area, often go missing. From my research, I have concluded that, while not everyone that goes to the beach late at night goes missing, there has never once been a time where someone at the beach went missing and everyone else didn't too. As I talked to people in that area, I began to hear rumors about a sea monster that lived deep out in the ocean, coming out for late-night snacks here and there. No one had seen it, but the people that lived close to the beach all believed in it. Out of all 6 people that I interviewed, every single one of them claimed to have felt its presence at least once. One elderly lady's testimony shocked me the most. "There is indeed something out at sea," she said. "I feel it often, maybe once or twice a month, and I swear to you, it always feels like it's calling to me, asking me to join it. I don't know how to explain it, but somehow I know that it wants me, or maybe everyone, I don't know. What I do know is that once about a year ago, I fell asleep alone in my bed as I always have since my husband passed away, and then woke up in the middle of the street to a car honking at me from about 20 feet away. I had been crossing the street in the direction of the beach, and I swear to you, young man, I could smell my husband's cologne. My husband, who has been dead for over 10 years. When I was almost positive that there was a monster out there, something responsible for my wife's disappearance, I set about creating a plan to find it and kill it. Below, I will recount to you exactly what happened 2 nights ago when I went looking for it, and hopefully what happens next. I was sitting down at the beach at 7 p.m. on a Monday evening, just as my wife had been, watching the water. I tried to imagine how she was feeling. Had she just been happy, hanging out with her friends? Or had she felt like something was wrong? If so, why hadn't she listened to her gut? Maybe like the old lady I had interviewed, she felt something calling to her. Did she hear my voice, smell my cologne? I could smell her. But I just watched as the powerful waves rolled in and out, reaching further and further up the beach at each assault, like an army conquering their enemy. The sounds of heavy wind crest the lapping waves into a steady beat of rhythmic terror. Towels flew through the air as late-night partiers ran from the tide. The ocean continued to eat up more and more of the beach, pushed along by a rippling disturbance far out at sea. I stood my ground as water reached my waist. I was prepared for what was coming. A terrible beast that dwelled so deep in the ocean that it had only been seen by humanity in glimpses that were always followed shortly by death. Wind ripped through my ears so harshly that I could hardly hear the cries of horror from those caught in the water. A group of 4 people who were also at the beach, presumably for late-night drinking and a picnic. I walked towards their screams, not to save them, but because I knew that's where terror lied. The monster would surface. Frigid water enveloped me in an ice-cold grip as I made my way closer. The pain was excruciating, but it was swept away as my body reacted to the thought of something much, much worse. My muscles were tense, ready for battle. I was shaking, not with fear but with excitement. The moment was long past due, and the adrenaline was kicking in. and then I saw it. A mile out. Two gigantic, vibrant red tentacles the size of small ships. They slapped the water, and another enormous wave was created. As the wave came towards me, the beast fully emerged with such force that, even in the water, I could feel the ground shaking. It was a giant squid the size of a skyscraper. While the tentacles were red, the rest of its head and body was a dark ruby, hinting at a light purple around its large face and eyes. 3 eyes that reached the size of a human head, one at each side of its face and one right in the middle. Yet as I set my eyes on the beast, I swear I felt her, Elizabeth. Not her lips or her touch or her breath, but just her presence. For the first time in my life, I cried tears of joy. This was the comfort that I needed, the comfort that I had come searching for. I smiled and began to swim forward. This was my eternity. But then the wave hit me and let my body go limp. All of the feelings that had been flooding through me disappeared, and I was left with only the faint memory of them as I returned to the real world once more. Fighting the current, the ground, and the wind was of no use. I let the world fold me into delirium as my body was pulled underwater, deep into the ocean, hundreds of yards from land. I thought about the 4 drunk men who had already been pulled to sea, ineffectively fighting the most powerful force in the world, water. I felt a pang of guilt. They hadn't known what was to come, but I had. I should have warned them. I arose from the water for just a moment, and took a deep breath before allowing my emotions to slip away, with the corpses of those dropping deeper and deeper into the ocean, never to be seen again. I closed my eyes. I had no control over where I went. How long was I underwater? 2 minutes, 3. My lungs were screaming. I was lightheaded and my throat felt so empty. I contemplated giving into the void, opening my mouth to nature and allowing the water to fill my mouth, throat, and lungs. It was at that moment that the waves ceased. Seconds from passing out, I began to swim upward, catching glimpses of fish and other sea life that I was too distressed to fully take in. Suddenly, out of my peripheral vision, I saw a shark approaching me with an urgent hunger in its eyes, and a confidence unrivaled by anything that I had ever seen. I almost laughed as it came towards me. You're telling me, I thought, that I came here hunting the most terrifying demon the world has to offer, and I'm going to die to a shark. No. I needed air. I swam up and I could see it coming for me. It was so close. I pulled my head above the water and took a quick gasp of air. As it approached biting distance and lunged itself towards me, I pulled out the knife sheathed in my boot and pushed myself even deeper down, narrowly escaping a fatal attack. It turned itself around for a second attempt, and I stood still, positioning myself just above its mouth. When it attacked the second time, I pushed myself upwards and found myself above the shark. Before it could get its mouth around me, I mounted it. It writhed wildly, attempting to shake me from its body, but I held on tightly with my legs and then used both hands to reach over its head and stab into its left eye. I pulled out the knife and stabbed the right eye, before scraping the blade across its gills. The sudden burst of energy caused my vision to float in darkness, and for just a moment, I was on the verge of passing out. I shook my head, fighting the darkness as the shark swam away, its own blood trailing behind it. Once I resurfaced and I got my bearings, I picked a direction and I began swimming. I knew the sea monster well. It would come for me soon. I no longer had to seek it out. In the distance, waves began to pick up speed. As the source of the disturbance drew closer, I began to bob up and down on the water. My senses left me. I wasn't unconscious, but it was like I was in a semi-sleep. I felt nothing and I heard nothing. If I moved, I could bring it all back. But if I stayed still with my eyes closed, and let the salt water keep me in sensory deprivation, The world was gone from me for a time. Gabe! Gabe! Are you alive? I opened my eyes. Looming over me, a savior in the sea, was a huge wooden ship. On it was my best friend Ben leaning over the railing and smiling at me. I laughed uncontrollably until I began to cough. I'm alive, pull me in. Ben threw down a buoy attached to a rope and pulled me up. Come on, man, he said, clasping each of my shoulders with a hand. You actually did it. I nodded. Water. Of course. He handed me a water bottle. Drink up, kid, you've earned it. I thought I was going to be fishing for chunks of you. I chugged until there was none left. Easy, buddy, he said, patting me on the back and laughing. I was worried about you. I was worried about you too. That thing could have sunk a ship from a mile away. Can't say I didn't feel it. I listened to your instructions though. We were camping out about 3 miles west until the heavy waves stopped, and then we came looking for you. I thought you'd be screaming for me. Didn't expect to find you taking a nap in the middle of the ocean. I got bored. I shrugged, smiling. I was happy to see him again. We had met a few days before to go over the plan, and while I trusted Ben with my life, he had come to my aid in more than a couple of bar fights over the years. He always had a rather carefree approach to life. He didn't really seem to care whether or not he died as long as he had had fun. Why don't we go meet the rest of the crew? He asked. And then we can catch up. There's some crazy dudes, but they'll get the job done. You did the hard part. The hard part? You mean lying down as bait? Give yourself some credit. You baited out the beast and survived. If you didn't live, it wouldn't come back, and we wouldn't be able to kill it. Are you sure you're up for this? I'm practically your brother, Gabe. What this thing took from you, it took from me too. We can't bring her back, but we will get revenge. I know you would do the same for me. I nodded. I would. And you're sure that we can kill it? Of course. We laughed and began walking down the stairs into the cabin. As we went down the passageway, I did duck so I wasn't hitting the ceiling. Ben, however, being about 3 inches shorter than me, didn't seem to notice. There was a speck of light at the bottom coming from where the entrance to the ship's cabin was. This space was only slightly less dark than the stairs. There were 2 small candles held in the middle of the room, by what looked like a worn gray vanity torn out of a bathroom and nailed into the ground. The ground was wooden and rough, with nails poking out at odd places. I made a mental note not to get out of bed without shoes on. There were 2 beds on each side of the room, all but one accompanied by a blanket, pillow, and a respected man. This is Abel, Ben said, motioning towards a guy who was openly flipping through a magazine on the left side of the room. Aye, Abel said, barely glancing at me as he flipped the page. And here's Michael and his brother Noah. Ben pointed at each of them in turn as he spoke. They were sitting on their beds on the other side of the room, Michael smoking a cigarette, while Noah shuffled cards between his hands. Michael grunted in acknowledgement, and Noah gave me a shy half smile, and then looked back down at his cards. Ben smiled at me. They're not too talkative, but they're good enough lads. I didn't mind. I was on the ship to do one thing: kill the beast that had taken my wife, and free the world from its terrors. And where will I be sleeping? You'll take my bed, Ben replied, pointing at the empty cot next to Abel. This time, I scanned him over completely. He was a behemoth of a man, near 7 feet tall and close to 400 pounds. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with a gray beard and a bald head. His face was scarred from long, sunny days at sea, and his white beater and gray shorts were stained in puke. Although he was white, he was tan to a degree that made him look closer to Hispanic. He noticed me looking at him, and he smiled. He was missing at least half of his teeth, including his front 2. The ones that he did have were black and rotting. You want to use my mag, do you, laddie? He chuckled, standing up from the bed and stretching, and then letting out a loud fart. I didn't respond. Instead, I brought my attention to the other half of the room, drawing a comparison between Abel and the brothers. They seemed normal enough, each wearing a t-shirt and jeans. Michael was clearly older, roughly 25 but appeared to be already balding. Noah, on the other hand, had a full head of hair and didn't look a day over 17. He looked away as he noticed me staring at him. Overall, I thought, they look at least somewhat sanitized. I concluded that I drew the short end of the stick. "Where will you be sleeping?" I asked Ben. "Oh, I don't mind the floor." I tried to argue, but it was pretty lackluster. After what I had been through, I probably deserved the bed. Besides, I got the feeling that Ben didn't want to sleep anywhere near Abel again. "Why don't we go up to the top deck and talk, huh?" I asked. We should probably have someone scouting anyway. Ben nodded and we ascended the stairs. I walked to the railing of the ship and looked out at the horizon. The sun was red, but the water was as blue as ever. A sudden gust of wind cooled us, and I sighed. "I miss her," I said, leaning my arms against the railing. "I know." I'd been angry every day since it took her. But the worst part is that I have no right to be mad. That thing is doing just what it was put onto this earth to do. It doesn't know how to do anything else. It's like a bear or a lion. It just wants to eat. Ben placed a hand on my back and I continued. "I find it very funny that I've spent the last 6 months of my life tracking this thing and creating a plan to kill it. And now that we found it, it all comes down to a fight that in all reality, we shouldn't win. Who are we to kill God's greatest creation? To be honest, I wasn't even completely sure it existed until I saw it today. And it's a heck of a lot bigger than I could have ever thought. We're in this together." "Right we are," I said, "because it's coming right now. It must have sensed our intentions." Ben looked at me with his eyes wide open, and his mouth taking on an O shape. "I thought you said it was going to be a few days." I was wrong. Gather the crew. Prepare for war. Ben flew down the stairs, screaming for his men to gather their weapons and to come on up. I did nothing, standing idly as I watched and I waited. Truth be told, I wasn't sure that we could complete the task, but I felt like it was my duty to try. I wondered if bringing 4 innocent men into this was worth it. None of them had seen it. They truly didn't know what was coming. Ben came back to the deck. "Freaking guys, they're taking their time getting up here. They don't understand what's coming. I'm not even sure if they believe it's real." "I'm not sure you know what's coming either." Ben sighed. "I suppose not, eh?" "It's not too late. It only wants me. I can jump off the ship, and if you're lucky, I'll survive long enough for you to get out of here." I knew he wouldn't agree, but I had to offer. Ben laughed. "I'm not doing this for you, brother. I'm doing this for myself. For what else do I have to live for?" I nodded, knowing that nothing I could say would convince him of how dangerous this was. I knew that even if we did succeed, this would not be a day that he remembered fondly. Michael and Noah were the first to come up the stairs. They both held rifles in their hands. I nodded at them. "You ready, men?" Michael nodded at me and smiled, his head raised high. He positioned his gun on his shoulder like a soldier preparing for war. Noah, however, put the gun on the floor and held his stomach with both hands. He looked like he was about to be sick. I raised an eyebrow at him and he said, "First time at sea, sir. Honestly, I just can't wait to get back on land." "Well, you better grow some sea legs fast," I said, "or you won't be getting home at all." I narrowed my eyebrows and scowled at him. Actually, I'm beginning to think that it's a likely possibility. Grow some balls. Abel sauntered up the stairs next, holding a beer in one hand and a pistol in the other. He glanced at me and then burped. "Aye, you ready to kill a monster?" He laid on the floor, patting his beer belly with his gun hand. Wake me up when she shows. I stepped forward, imagining in my head what it would be like to pull the gun from his hand and pistol whip him with it. Ben sensed the tension and stepped in front of me, putting a hand on my shoulder. I'll talk to him. I pulled back from his touch. This is your crew? I snapped. I've had a long day and I've almost died in more ways than these illiterate guys can count. What did you do, pick them up off the streets? Offer them each a bottle of beer for their time? I thought I was the one with the death wish. You piece of crap, we might as well. Before I could finish, a deafening splash was heard in the distance, like a very large object was dropped from a very great height into the water. It echoed through the ocean, like someone screaming in a cave. As the waves around us picked up in pace and size, wetting the deck, a sudden wind ran through me, so strong that it almost knocked me to the ground. Give me a weapon, I told Ben. Something I can shoot long range. Will that stop it? No, but maybe it'll annoy it enough so it won't want to get any closer, yet. He swallowed hard, and then nodded and ran down the stairs. I attempted to take control of the group. Listen, men, I said, throwing my voice up a notch so that it carried through the wind. You guys don't know what's coming for. I was interrupted by Abel's chuckles as he shot a bullet absent-mindedly through the air. I carried on, attempting to ignore him. You don't know what's coming for us. A description of what this beast is won't do you any good. We have to strike hard and fast. If it gets too close, we're all dead. The wind picked up faster, buzzing through my ears as if I was being swarmed by 100 flies. The storms are brewing, Abel said. I shook my head. You idiot. Harding quick like a strike of lightning, I first saw the monster miles off on the horizon, and then it was only 2 miles away, and then a half a mile. And it stopped, completely still, staring straight into me. Its huge eyeballs seemed to stretch across its entire face. They appeared to be human. Blue, kind and wise, like my wife's. My dead wife, who had gone missing in this very area 3 years prior, while I was at sea with the Navy, fighting for my country, but not my girl. Those were her eyes, just larger. I was sure of it. As I stared into them, I couldn't help but remember everything about her. My Elizabeth. Her voice, the perfect softness and pitch to bring me up from any bad mood. The way she would hold my hand so tight as if her life depended on it. I remembered holding her hand in a movie theater, kissing her under the stars, falling asleep with her body against mine. And then there were gunshots, as Michael and Noah began to unload the rifles into the beast. And then Ben was running up the cabin stairs and throwing a gun my way while at the same time loading his. I shook my head hard, regaining my composure, and then screamed loud enough to be heard over the water, gunshots, and wind. Hit it with all you got, men. This is war, don't let up. Our bullets pelted the monster for minutes on end as it stayed about 200 yards out, using its massive form and strength to send enormous wave after wave at us. Our ship was big and strong, but more than once a wave knocked me over, and I was left with about a gallon of salt water in my mouth. The beast didn't seem to be in any pain, but simply trying to decide whether or not we were worth pursuing any further. It swayed side to side, occasionally moving backward and then forward again. Noah was balled up on the floor, crying, with his rifle on the floor as well. However, Ben, Michael, and I were working as a well-oiled machine, firing together and taking turns reloading, as we did our all to keep the monster at bay. When I had to reload the second time, I traded my gun out for Noah's and ordered him to reload it. Abel was nowhere to be seen, presumably crying in the cabin like the little baby that he is. By the time that I had to reload again, I looked over to see Noah had joined in once more, pelting the beast with as many bullets as he could manage. He looked over at me and screamed, "I'm sorry," were the words that I had read off his lips. As I finished reloading, I began firing again. The monster submerged itself in the water, until we could no longer even make out a shadow of it. "Oh no," Michael screamed. "Is it going to capsize us?" Maybe, I said, dropping my gun to the floor. If it is, we're done. No, Ben said. It didn't seem like it wanted to hurt us. Did you see the size of that thing? And our bullets weren't exactly scaring it. If it wanted us dead, we would be dead. Noah sniffed harshly and wiped the tears from his eyes. Are you insane? Did you see the size of those waves? Why do that if... I interjected. No, Ben's right. I'm not going to begin to hypothesize on what its motives are, but you better believe that it's a hell of a lot stronger than it showed us today. Maybe it was playing with its food, or maybe it needs us for something. Like I said, I don't know. But the important thing is that we're alive, and I intend to keep it that way. Ben, come with me. We walked down into the cabin and found Abel laying in his bed, flipping through his magazine as calm as ever. He winked at me. I spit in his direction. Go upstairs with the rest of the crew. I can't stand to even look at you, coward. He stood up and laughed, and then slapped my back roughly, but followed my orders nonetheless. When he closed the cabin doors behind him, Ben and I sat down on my bed. This is bad, I admitted. I saw the way you were looking at the thing when I got up there. I heard you say her name too. Yeah, it had her eyes, man. I'm telling you, it stole them. And I think I know why it didn't kill us. He didn't respond, so I continued. I don't know why, but I'm beginning to think that it wants me to go willingly. I wasn't even completely sure that's what killed Elizabeth until today, but its very essence just radiates her. Either way, we're here to take it out, he whispered, as if he were scared the monster might hear him. I nodded and then turned around and walked back up the stairs. I heard Ben following behind me. It was nearing nighttime, and as the moon rose and the first stars came into view, I saw Noah and Michael standing against the railing with their heads together, staring out at the sea. Abel was sitting down cross-legged on the other side of the ship. All of you, go rest up, I said. Us four are going to take turns as lookout while Ben captains the ship. 4-hour shifts. I'll start. When you're on lookout, pay close attention. It could come back in an hour, or it could come back in a week. It will come back though, and we aren't going back to land until it does. In the next few days, I spent most of my time sleeping, writing, and aimlessly staring out at the sea. Ben and I started teaching Michael and Noah yoga to keep us all active and entertained. They actually seemed to enjoy it, and I often found them practicing poses on their own. Abel, however, declined our invitation for yoga, saying that we were all a bunch of babies. I would rather jump off the ship than do yoga with you bunch of weirdos. I'll cut him some slack, seeing that we had been dry of alcohol for almost a full day, and he was probably going through withdrawals. Ben and I decided that it would be good to keep the ship relatively clean, if only for our own sanity. So as to not stir any tides in the ship, we didn't dish out chores. We handled everything ourselves. We liked the routine. One day around noon, Ben and I were keeping ourselves busy by cleaning the top deck when Noah came up and asked us if we needed any help. To be honest, Ben replied, I'm not too sure this deck really needs cleaning all that bad. Me and Gabe just kinda need something to keep us busy, or we're gonna start losing it. You're welcome to join us if you would like though. Noah walked closer to it and then glanced backward. Speaking of losing it, Abel has been a little off the past couple days. I mean more than usual. Have you noticed he's been mumbling to himself? I nodded. I had noticed. Yeah, well, he's also been messing with me quite a bit. Earlier on when I was alone with him, he told me to drop and give him 20 or he was going to throw me overboard. Did you? Ben asked. Yeah, Noah said, his face turning red as he rubbed the back of his head with his hand. Anyway, that's not all. Earlier well, I hate to be a snitch, but... No, I interjected. Telling us is the right thing to do. I need to know so I can keep an eye on him. I'm not letting anyone on the ship get hurt. What else did he do? Well, he's just been teasing me a lot. Slapping my butt, you know. like baseball players do, flicking me in the back of the head as I walk by. He stole my deck of cards too. I know I sound like a kid complaining to the principal about being bullied, but well, I just wish we could all be on the same team. The beginning of that last sentence, the part about him sounding like a kid, didn't sit well with me. In all reality, Noah was a kid. It hadn't truly sunk into me until then. He shouldn't have been out there with us, risking his life for a mission that he had no stake in. He should have been in school, playing sports, video games, or chasing a girl. "I'll make sure that he doesn't mess with you anymore," Ben said. "Next time he does, let me know." I smiled, remembering all the times that Ben had come to my aid back in the day. When he said that he was there for you, he meant it. Once way back when we were still in school, I had gotten jumped by 4 guys after football practice because I'd been talking to one of their girlfriends. Ben saw it go down and he jumped in. We had gotten our butts kicked in, and when I asked him what he was thinking jumping in like that, he had said, "Well, I figured you might not get hurt as bad if they had 2 punching bags instead of 1. I sat down, leaning myself against the ship's railing. I motioned for Noah and Ben to join me, and they sat on either side of me. "So Noah, what's your story? Why are you and your brother on this ship?" Noah smiled faintly. "I'm not too sure, to be honest. Our parents were meth addicts. They used to toss me around a lot. Michael said that they weren't so bad when he was little, but I don't know." He shrugged his shoulders and he stood up, staring off into the distance. He tried to protect me the best that he could, but even at 18, he was working 2 jobs. He couldn't always be there, but he practically raised me on his own. Anyway, one day when I was 12, he told me that we were leaving. And wow, we've been gone ever since. I think that was 5 years ago. Since then, we've traveled around in his car doing odd jobs here and there. Never stayed in one place for more than a few months. I guess that's how we ended up here. Ben picked us up right off the streets, taught us what we needed to know. If we finish this job, it'll be the best pay that we've ever had. And we will finish this job. I know I seemed scared the other day, but that's not me. It won't be me. Not anymore. Noah went down and fetched Michael from the cabin, and they took turns telling us stories for the rest of the night. Their travels around the country, times that they had to sleep under bridges or on park benches. They had once been caught trying to sell fake tickets to a Yankees game, and they had to run from the cops. A chase that ended when Michael got hit by a taxi. He tried to run across the street and scale over the hood like in the movies, but instead, he was walking with a limp for a month. They had got off with a warning, and by the next day, they were in Boston pulling the same scam at the Red Sox games. As Noah finished the story, Michael laughed and put his hands up. Hey, we're strictly legal now, I swear." It was the first time that I had seen him smile. We stayed up until sunrise talking like that, and it wasn't until 3 in the morning that they all went to bed. I, however, was on lookout when morning came. When I saw the bleeding red sky, I frowned, and I found myself remembering an old saying of my grandmother's. "Red sky in morning, sailor take warning." Boredom, I believe, is one of the most dangerous things in the world. It's like a starving lion inside of you, searching for any source of food, any way to make itself feel full again. Boredom drives people mad. It causes them to do terrible things for no reason, but to amuse themselves. What Abel did on my 3rd night on the ship was exactly what I was trying to prevent with all of the chores and yoga and conversation that he chose not to partake in. It was dinner time, and Ben had served us all the best meal that we had had since I had come aboard. Cold beans and crackers. I was amidst lathering down yet another cracker when Abel, who had apparently already finished his meal, stood up from his bed and belched before asking, "Which one of you wants to fight?" I stood up with the intention of stopping any potential fight from taking place, but Abel, however, mistook my action for an invitation. He stepped towards me and smiled. He had about 150 pounds and half a foot on me, but while his body was soft and fat from years of laying in bed and gorging on fast food, mine was lean and hard. And from my time in the Navy, I knew how to fight. "You think you're so tough, don't ya?" he asked. "Well, let's see how tough you are when you're begging me not to snap your neck." I looked around for help. I wasn't sure if I would be able to defend myself against a man of that size. Ben was up on top on lookout, so that left Noah and Michael. I looked at them and they both looked away. Crap. I took a step back, weighing my options. I had enough time to reach for my knife, but did I really want this to escalate to that? I could charge him, but he even had the faintest clue on how to fight. He would take me to the ground. I had no hope of wrestling with a man that size. Before I could make a decision, he reached me and attempted to punch me in the face. I ducked under it and I punched him in the nose. He threw his head backward and blood sprayed upwards, almost hitting the ceiling and then falling down, some of it landing on my head. I laughed. How much of that is booze? With quickness that I didn't think could be attributed to such a big man, he grabbed both of my arms with his hands and sidestepped behind me, holding me in place. I kicked and squirmed, but it was of no use. He was too strong. He pushed me against the back wall, and I felt his hot breath on my neck as he whispered, "Why shouldn't I kill you right now?" I heard footsteps behind me, and then Noah was screaming in rage as he threw himself at Abel from behind. Abel almost fell, but quickly regained his balance as he turned and pushed Noah in the chest with both hands. Noah flew back several feet, landing onto my bed. I, however, took the opportunity to tackle Abel to the ground. Before I could do anything else, the ship took a violent turn and then another, and I was surfing Abel as we slid across the room. Jumping to my feet, I turned and I ran up the cabin stairs before Abel could even react. I looked out into the water and saw what appeared to be a water tornado, whirling with so much force that our ship was being sucked toward it as the water was pulled down below it. "Water spout!" Ben yelled as he attempted to steer the ship away from them. A large funnel shape of water and air was chasing us through, appearing to come straight from the heavens with the sole intention of destroying our ship. We were pulled towards it, and then pushed away, and at each shaking of the ship, we were coming closer and closer to being flipped over, and left to die at sea. At one specific turbulence, I was tossed across the ship, barely catching myself on the railings. When I looked out at the sea, I was facing the beast. The monster had somehow sent those things after us. As what? As a warning? To mock us? To show us how easily it could kill us? After I saw it, the water spouts appeared to go back into the sky, as if they were never there. The monster used its 2 red tentacles to taunt me with a "come hither" motion. This time, its eyes were brown.
"Me and my brother are gonna die."
The voice started off as Noah's, and then switched to Michael's slightly deeper southern drawl as the creature said the last 2 words. It stretched the last word out for several seconds, and by the end, it appeared to be a different voice altogether. It sounded like a demon, high-pitched and seeming to go on forever. The word was reverberating against itself. I could hear the I sound that it had just made, while it was making another. Like a chorus of monsters from hell were all working together to produce this sound. And then Michael came barreling up the stairs with Noah chasing him from behind, trying to grab at his older brother. Michael absent-mindedly pushed his sibling back with one arm, and Noah was sent careening down the stairs. "Mama! Mama!" Michael screamed. "Mama, what happened?" As he reached the edge of the boat, he screamed, "Mom, I'm coming!" And then he put his hands out, as if preparing to jump off the ship and into the monster's waiting embrace. I was too far away to do anything but watch. I covered my mouth with my hands. "No," I whispered. "No." But at the last instant, Ben came from the outer edge of my vision and tackled Michael to the floor. His chin hit the ground with a loud pop and a crunch, and he groaned in pain. I looked back at the beast, which was now less than 50 yards away from us. It was standing still, watching, completely mesmerized by what was happening. It wasn't concerned with anything else. It wasn't scared of our guns, of our intention to kill it. It hadn't come for a battle. It had come for a show. Is it really a fight if only one side gets any real hits in? In the time that I was lost in my thoughts, I missed what happened only a few feet away from me. For that, I will never forgive myself. I can't help but wonder if maybe this story would have turned out differently if I had only just paid attention to my crew, to my best friend for one more second. After being tackled to the ground, Michael was in a great deal of pain. He had most certainly dislocated his jaw, and he was bleeding on the floor from where he had bitten his own tongue. He acted calmly though, and when I turned around, he had silently pulled out his gun and shot my best friend in the head. I wasn't even looking at them until the gun went off, and by the time that I turned around, Michael was already swimming towards the monster as he cried out in joy. I pulled my pistol out from my waistband and started shooting at the monster as I sobbed and screamed incomprehensible words of anger. I hadn't gotten more than 3 shots off when I heard Noah, screaming just as loudly as I was, begin shooting alongside me. He had 2 assault rifles, one in each hand, and he was shooting them akimbo style, his face a portrait of maniacal hate. I didn't know how much he had seen, but he knew that his brother was gone, and I knew that he would never be the same. When Noah had to reload his guns, he tossed one of them to me and we reloaded simultaneously as the beast came towards us. I had accepted death, and I believe that Noah had too. We had lost everything important to us, but God help us if we weren't going to give that thing hell before it took our lives too. So there we were, shooting as it drew closer. It was clear that our bullets were causing it a little pain, but it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain lion. Our bullets were more annoying than anything else. And that was when Abel came up with his pistol in hand, though he didn't fire alongside us. "This is it, boys," he yelled over the rapid-fire booms of our guns. "Put your hands up." I hated him since the moment that I met him. But it wasn't until I saw him holding Noah from behind with his gun pressed against Noah's temple that I knew that he was going to kill him. Now Abel spoke to me directly. "Put your gun down, or I will kill him." "Are you insane?" I asked. "It's going to kill us if we don't keep fighting." Abel laughed. "You don't think it could have killed us already, you moron? Now throw your gun into the water, or I will kill him." I shook my head, and I pointed my own weapon directly at Abel's head. "You kill him, you die." Abel shielded his own body with Noah's and then pointed his gun down and shot Noah in the foot. He let Noah howl in pain and try to yank himself free before he continued. "I can wait." "Your call," Abel continued, pointing his gun at me. I threw my gun into the ocean. "Now," Abel said, kicking Noah's gun over to me. "Throw this out." I did as he said. "I worship you," Abel called out to the sea, where the monster could be seen slowly backing away watching. "Don't leave me. I brought you 2 sacrifices. Take them." He hoisted Noah up over his head, and then he threw him off of the ship. Before Noah could even hit the water, I had removed my knife from my boot and was raising at Abel. He turned, his arms up and ready to defend himself, but I saw his blind spot and I went for it. He covered his lower abdomen with both hands after I plunged my knife into him and pulled it back out, but he hadn't reacted at all while I was doing it. I was too fast. Ben used to joke that no one ever saw my knife, because I was so fast that anyone I pulled it on was dead before they knew what was happening. Until the beast, I had solid met a problem that my knife couldn't solve. In its absence, the rule applied once more. Abel fell to the ground and I walked up to him. While I did feel a little sick watching him squirm and beg for his life, I never had a problem killing someone who deserved to die. I looked him in the eyes as I finished him off. He deserved that much. Without a second glance, I ran and grabbed the very buoy that Ben had used to pull me up, tied it to the same very rope, and threw it down for Noah. His blood was spreading out around him, like seasoning in a soup. I had to get him back on the ship before the blood loss was too much. "Noah!" I screamed. "Noah, are you alright? Grab the buoy."
I'm here.
His voice was raspy, dry, and weak. I just strained to hear it. He had no strength left to climb, so it was up to me to pull him all the way up. Noah clung onto the buoy and I began to reel him in slowly, praying that I had tied the knot tight enough. My arms, legs, and back were burning, but I couldn't let him go. He had to survive. "You're halfway here," I screamed. "You have to help me. Start climbing up the rope." I didn't have much strength left. If he didn't help me, I was going to drop him, and he might never get back up. He grunted and followed my orders, wrapping his legs around the rope and using his arms to slowly pull himself upward. All I could do now was keep the rope taut while he ascended. "You can do it, keep going." He said nothing. His face and arms were turning red as every muscle in his body strained. Every time he pulled himself upward, he let out a cry of pain, and when he was just below eye level, I saw that he was sobbing. "Okay," I screamed. "Stop, hold yourself still, and then reach your right hand to mine." I put both of my arms down towards him. "When I've got you, let go of the rope and grab me with your left hand, and then I'll pull you up." He nodded, letting out an animalistic sound of pain. His face was swelling, the veins pulsating, and he was now an even darker shade of red, like a crimson balloon getting ready to pop. "Okay, ready? Go!" I grabbed his right hand, and then we paused for just a moment, making eye contact. I nodded, what I hoped was a reassuring gesture, and then he screamed with all of his might and flung himself from the rope. I caught his left hand in mine and then started to slowly walk my legs backward until I couldn't even see him anymore, praying for God to give me enough strength to finish the job. When I saw his hands latch onto the wooden railing, I dropped the rope and I ran to him, and then I helped him pull himself up onto the deck. In the end, we were both lying on our sides, cursing at each breath. It wasn't pretty, but we got the job done. My victory was short-lived though, as Noah's blood was already beginning to pull up around him, and the consciousness was starting to drain from his eyes. "Stay with me," I said as I slapped him softly on the cheek. "I'll be right back." I ran into the cabin and dug through our supplies until I found the first aid kit, and then I ran back up and I took Noah's shoe off, exposing the wound. If he had been wearing boots, I might have been able to say that he got lucky. However, he was wearing cheap tennis shoes that did very little to protect him from the bullet. He wasn't wearing socks, which made things a lot less complicated. The wound was sickening to look at. Blood trickled at a slow and steady rate, and the foot was swollen to what appeared to be nearly double its normal size. If his shoe hadn't been a size too big, I probably wouldn't have been able to get it off without a knife or scissors. I could see the bullet sticking out halfway in his foot. It looked like something was growing from inside of him. "You're gonna be alright," I said, "but thanks to that drunk over there." I motioned to Abel's lifeless body sitting against the railing about 20 feet from us. "We don't have any alcohol, so you're just gonna have to deal with the pain sober." "Sure," he whispered as he laid his head back down on the ground, fighting back tears. I put a sterilized glove on each hand, grabbed the tweezers, and removed the bullet. Luckily, it wasn't too difficult, and although Noah grunted in pain a couple times, he didn't make much fuss. His eyes were dull and lifeless, as if now he was in a world without his older brother. Nothing else was worth caring about. I cleaned the wound with rubbing alcohol. At this, Noah made a sound deep in his throat and closed his eyes, but made no complaint. "Sorry," I said. "I'm not a doctor." Finally, I encased his wound in the entire foot with gauze, covered it all with duct tape, and then, holding his foot with one hand, I linked the belt around my other hand in his foot, tightening the belt around the wound by pulling the end of it with my mouth. "That's all I can do," I said. "Now we hope for the best. I'll go get you something to eat. And then I guess I'll try to get you back on land into a real doctor. I think we scared that thing off for now. I'll come back to kill it on my own sometime, or die trying." Noah was still lying flat on the ground with his eyes closed, but his voice was as strong as it was before he got shot, maybe stronger. For once, he spoke with true confidence. You idiot. Do you really think that we're getting out of here? Have you not figured that out yet? After everything that's happened, that thing hasn't killed a single one of us. Not directly anyway. It wants us to choose to join it, or go insane and kill each other. Did the water spouts really hurt us? Has anything it's done ever directly hurt anyone? No, it's a freaking illusionist. But it could kill us if it wanted. It's playing with us. It's bored out here. We're a game, we're a show. We aren't a fight. We were dead the second that we stepped on the ship. This thing has no purpose. It simply exists. It's a freak of nature. It was God's biggest mistake. It was never supposed to be here, and we were never supposed to find it. It's bored on this earth because it's greater than us. It's lonely. And we're its pets. Its prisoners. You have been for months ever since your wife died, and you still don't realize it. It's gonna keep playing with us until we surrender ourselves to it, or until we die. We are never leaving this ocean, and none of our bodies will ever be found. You don't know what you're saying, I said. It backed away because we were gonna kill it. Can't you see it's injured? I can kill it. But I'm not letting anyone else die out here. I'm bringing you back to land first. Getting you to a real doctor. No! Noah opened his eyes and sat up quickly, as if jostled from sleep by a nightmare. He looked me in the eyes. Do you think that I even want to live anymore? My brother is gone, and I'm not even sad because I know I'll be joining him soon. I can't believe it took me this long to realize it. There was a fire in his eyes that I had never seen before. The boy that used to be so weak, timid, and eager to please was now at the point in his life that no one should have to enter so young. The point where he just didn't care anymore. Not about his past traumas, not about his own life, and definitely not about anyone else's. He looked into the void and the void had looked right back, and then taken the last thing that he truly cared about. As far as he was concerned, this was the Grim Reaper's boat, and we were sailing right into hell. I turned away from him and busied myself with dumping Abel's body into the ocean. It took every ounce of strength that I had, but it was a lot easier to manage when he wasn't breathing. I mopped up his blood and then turned to the scene of my best friend only a few yards away. Ben, I whispered, I'm so sorry. He was lying face down on the floor. His blood had created a pool all around him. Just in front of his head there were a few specks of little white stuff, about the size of peanuts. I assumed that it was brain matter. It was so surreal. He had been with me since I was a small child. Whenever I needed him, he was there, and he was the only reason that I hadn't offed myself when I lost Elizabeth. How could there be a world without him? It was like imagining life without air or water or food. It simply didn't compute. For a moment, I sincerely felt that if I were to clean him up and bandage his wounds, he would just poof, come back to life. But no, he was gone. His heart was no longer beating, and I could feel the stickiness of his blood on my palm as I caressed his cheek. How unfair could the world be? I didn't get to say goodbye, and he didn't get the movie star ending that he deserved. He just got shot, and in the blink of an eye, poof, no more Ben. I quietly thanked him for everything that he had done for me, and then I told myself that it was time to move on. Chances are Noah was right. I would be joining him soon enough. I hoisted Ben over my shoulder, walked him to the side of the ship, and then said the last two words that I would ever say to him. Goodbye, brother. Then I helped Noah downstairs, fed him some dinner, and I went to bed. The next 24 hours on the ship were relatively easy. I spent the day preparing for battle and nursing Noah. There was a certain dullness in his eyes that made me uneasy. He was content just to lay in bed all day. He ate and drank when I told him to, and he offered no objections when I cleaned and rebandaged his wound. Other than Ben, Noah was the person on the ship that I cared about the most. But in the hours after Ben and Michael were killed, I couldn't help but feel that I was alone. Or at least my only company was a breathing corpse, waiting for nature to catch up with him. I set our ship in a direction that I hoped would lead to land within a day or two, but I knew that I was going to meet the monster one more time, and I planned to kill it, even if it meant sacrificing both Noah's life and my own. Call it selfish, but I don't think Noah cared. That night when I tried to go to sleep, every time I closed my eyes, I had the unnerving feeling that someone was watching me, and when I opened them, and I looked across the room at Noah, he was staring straight at me. I stared back and he didn't look away or even blink. We stayed like that for some time, and I couldn't help but think back to my very first day on the ship. Back then, Noah had been more or less just a normal kid who had gotten sucked into something way out of his pay grade. He used to look away every time I tried to make eye contact with him, and now it was like he was challenging me. But to what? I knew I wasn't going to sleep anytime soon, regardless of what Noah was doing, so I got up from bed and prepared for war. After the stunt that Abel had pulled, I now had only 2 rifles and a pistol left, and our ammo supply was very, very depleted. I brought the last of our weapons and ammo up to the top of the ship, and fully loaded the guns. When it came back, I would be ready. This time, one of us was dying. I didn't care if I had to jump off that ship and chase it down on my own. There was only going to be one last battle, win or lose. When I came back to the cabin, Noah's eyes were closed, but I kneeled down in front of him. After a moment, his eyes opened. I got the impression that he had never been asleep. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He deserved an apology. His brother was dead and he was most likely following shortly behind. All because of me. He laughed quietly. It was forced, devoid of emotion. "I can't blame you. You were under its spell, just as I am now. The only difference is, I realize it and you don't." He smiled. "I think I'll be joining Michael soon. I miss him." He wiped a tear from his eyes. "I can't wait to be with him again." I nodded. "I think he's waiting for you. But first, let's avenge him." Noah closed his eyes and turned away from me, signaling that the conversation was over. I followed his cue and I went to my own bed. Although sleep didn't come easily. I thought about life and death. Mostly, I thought about Ben, and I thought about Elizabeth. And I thought about the kids that we never had. I remembered good times, bad times, and all the times I thought about ending it all. After Elizabeth died, I had spent so many hours with my pistol up against my own temple. But the one thing that kept me going was what I didn't know. How had she died? Was she even dead? She had gone missing in the ocean. Rumors about the monster were there, but they were just whispers in the wind. I did my research, and when I realized that it was true, I had only one more reason to live. Revenge. Ben had helped me until the very end, and then died for it. Whether I kill it or not, I thought I'll be dead soon enough. And then I saw her, Elizabeth, standing above my bed, smiling at me. "My love," she said, her voice a ghostly yet calming whisper. "Avenge me." "I will," I said, the tears already beginning to flow. "Do you still love me?" "I will always love you, my darling." She kissed me and then disappeared. And then I opened my eyes and I reached for her. It had been a dream. But why had I woken up? Something in the cabin felt different, but I couldn't quite put a finger on it. Like a mental itch I couldn't scratch, I searched the room fruitlessly until... Noah. I shot up from my bed as I realized something that filled me with a dismay even darker than what I had felt when Ben had died. Noah was gone. I jumped up from bed and I ran up the cabin stairs as I remembered what Noah had said to me the night before. "I think I'll be joining Michael soon. I miss him. I can't wait to be with him again." I hadn't realized he meant this. I didn't think that he would do it himself. I knew he was expecting his own death, but as foolish as it sounds, I never thought that he would take it himself. I reached the top deck at a full sprint, just in time to hear a splash. When I looked down into the ocean, I saw exactly what I had expected. Noah had just gotten out of bed, creeped up the stairs, then jumped into the water. This was either a suicide attempt, or he was trying to join his brother Michael with the monster. In my mind, those two things were one and the same. "Noah!" I screamed. But he was already swimming away from the ship as fast as he could with a bullet in his foot. I could see blood trailing behind him, and I thought it was very likely a shark would get to him before he had any hope of reaching the monster, though I doubted Noah cared either way. I didn't even try to save him. I probably couldn't have. But even if I did, he would just try again. At least this way, he got to go out on his own terms. So I watched as Noah got smaller and smaller in the distance, approaching his own demise, his own eternity. The sun was beginning to come up from behind the clouds, casting a glow over him like a spotlight. It was in a way beautiful, but as dawn faded away to morning, I noticed something that made me laugh so hard that I fell over. The sky was red, and the monster was being illuminated by its glow. It's coming towards me slowly as I finish writing this letter that I began working on my second night on the ship. I'm going to roll it up and leave it in this 12-liter soda bottle that I brought just for this reason. Abel, Ben, and Michael are dead. Noah will be joining them soon. But I think I'm finally going to face off with this beast just as I've wanted to since the day that I learned of its existence. I will fight it until... Wait, I think I hear Elizabeth. Ben too. They say everything's gonna be alright. They say that I was wrong. I was wrong all along. We are already in hell. I was wrong. The monster is our savior. They're living with him. I can go and be with them forever. My girl is waiting for me. I'll join them. Earlier today, I found Gabriel Fisher's soda bottle floating on the shore at the beach near my home. 2 weeks ago, my daughter went missing here. What do you make of it?